recording on this computer, it tells me. So we should be good here. So welcome, February 23rd room. And one of the things, I did post a schedule in the online on Facebook of what we're hoping to do, tentative schedule through June, different things. And I'll repost that in a couple places so people have it and a link to it. A couple of the things, interesting things coming up. We're hoping to do actually in the month of May. Got a lot coming up in the spring. Of course, we have the Passover and the Omer count and all that. That's going to be some fun rooms. But in the month of March, coming up in just a few weeks, we're going to do some movie nights. Only it's going to be the Matrix movies. We're going to take a look at those and look at some of the Torah themes that run through the Matrix movies, which are absolutely fascinating, and bring in a lot of information that's out there regarding this. It's a great vehicle to study with, to learn with. And anyone has any ideas at any point for future rooms, just please let me know, suggest them. But that's one we're going to do. Of course, we're going to do one on Purim, hopefully. And like I said, the Omer count will have 7 weeks in a row. There are very different types of rooms that will be unique, I hope, to that. People talk about the Omer count, and it seems kind of, boring, dull. We forget to do it, whatever. What's the point? But for some, and, there's ways to really get a whole lot out of it. Some very unusual ways to look at what that's all about. So that's kind of coming up this over the months ahead. Bezrat Hashem. So tonight, what I did to jump in tonight, I've got some stuff now and then to just pulled together for these kind of rooms where we didn't have something scheduled or we weren't sure, because Elisheva is going to finish Direct Hashem, but she can't do it right now because she has other commitments. So I'm jumping in here with, I'm just nicknaming it K2. We did K1 last week or the week before, whatever it was, and K1, K2, meaning some basics about Kabbalah. It's just some of the mechanisms of how things function in creation, how God set things up, which is basically what that's all about. So what we'll do is have just kind of like a quick review of a couple slides here. I'm not that artistic, but I get I get a laptop here that enabled me to do some fun stuff with the slides, and so I'm learning. So hopefully these won't be too tacky. Just to jazz them up a little bit. The content's more important always, but still, it's nice. Make them look pretty. So basically the two of and again, any questions at any point, just jump in. Basically, the whole idea of, like I said, about Kabbalah is understanding how things work in the world, and the spiritual underpinnings to everything, and the spiritual worlds, and what we can understand about God from our perspective. And that's really what it's all about. So it's just kind of like the deeper level understanding of things. It's nothing like bizarre or weird or things people talk about. But with anything else, you can take any kind of spiritual teaching and just completely, run crazy with it in the wrong directions. That's why it's always important to stay connected to kosher traditional sources and not some of this wackiness that's out there calling itself Kabbalah. Just like there's stuff out there that's calling itself Bible study or messianic this or that. It's like, people just invent whatever. So we're not going to invent anything. Everything here is, unless it's something original, and then I'll tell you, so it's an original idea. This is all, connected back to traditional Torah framework for these teachings. So if you have questions on like where this is found or sources that I'm not clear, you can PM me or whatever later, and I'll provide those. So anyhow, one of the basic concepts, first of all, is that, to understanding things is different structures or templates in the Bible to help us understand things. A template is simply something you can look at. It's a kind of a mental visual aid and help you understand things, because that's how we think. And there's a couple significant templates, two very significant templates, that everything kind of is structured along these two things in the entire Bible. And simply put, one is a template of 4, one is a template of 10. So what does that mean? We talked about this a little bit last week, so I'm just going to go through it like kind of quickly, very quickly this week, and we can put more notes up and stuff later. But the template of 4, as we'll see in a second, is based around this idea of this 4-letter name of God, the Yod, He, and the Vav, and the He. It's the name of God that's found more times in the Tanakh than all the other names combined. So it's a very significant name because it has to do with God dealing with us in this world and creation and this reality. So that's why it comes up a lot, and it's very much grounded in God's mercifulness, thank goodness, or we'd be toast. So it's a key name, and it's considered like the trunk of the tree. It's called the most holy name of God, and it's like the trunk of the tree, and that everything emanates off this trunk, everything connects to this trunk. So it's kind of provides a measure of things being only a couple degrees of separation from each other. In the entire Bible. So you can have one concept here and another one there, and you don't see how they're connected, but they both connect to this 4-letter name of God. And then you could, if you understand what that means, you can start drawing connections between these other things that you might not normally consider. So that's basically it. There's a system of 4, which we're going to look at here briefly in a second. And then there's another template that's a system of 10, which is that there's 10 of these characteristics or emanations of God that permeate through all parts of creation and even before creation. And these 10 emanations called Sephirot exist through that system of 4. So there's, and I'll explain what that means in 1 second here. So I'm just going to go on to the next slide here. This is a PDF file, so I think I have to scroll. Hopefully I'm not going to mess this up too bad. Okay, it seems to be working. All right. So I'm hoping y'all are seeing kind of a light blue slide, says 4 worlds of existence with Genesis 1:1 at the top. Yeah? Oh, good. I got a confirmation. Thank you. So the 4 worlds of existence, as I mentioned, are grounded in the 4-letter name of God, which you see on the left expressed in a vertical fashion, just to kind of a visual aid. When we talk about things like this, we have to deal with how we think, but it's not like they're stacked on top of each other in reality or anything like that. It's not like you can, fly so far and then you hit heaven and fly further and you hit, this or that. These are spiritual concepts, but we still have to think of it this way. And so the 4 letters are associated, as you see in the middle, it's called 4 worlds of existence, okay? There's this a little difference here between 2 terms I want to explain. One is creation, one is existence. If you go to Genesis 1:1, it says right at the beginning that in the beginning, Elohim created, and then after that, it starts telling us about creation. But we know there's something before creation because it tells us there is. It tells us there's something called Elohim, or God, as we like to say, before creation. So there's some type of existence prior to creation. So that's the first thing to put in mind. So creation is within existence, but there's a level of existence outside of creation too. So this idea of these 4 worlds of existence is that there's a world before creation. And this world is associated with that first letter in the name, which is the small letter Yod. And the Yod is like almost like a little comma. It's a very small little jot, And it gives you the idea of something very singular, very tiny, and it is. That's like a singular point that everything emanates out of, which science talks about that in terms of like a Big Bang, and the Kabbalists talk about it in a similar way. And that's before creation. And then you have the next 3 letters of the name, which relate to these 3 levels or 3 worlds of creation. And the first one would be the higher spiritual world of like the heavenlies, the throne room of God, that very pure, perfect, highest level of creation. And then between us and that, there's this level what we call like angels and other entities that are the go-betweens. It's the go-between world. It's got all kinds of interesting spiritual entities in it, some of which we would consider to be agents of confusion. It's just part of the reality. And then down, of course, the last world is the physical world down here that we live in. And you see these 3 things in a number of places, 3-4 things in a number of places in the Tanakh, but especially in Jacob's dream, where he had the dream of the ladder. and he dreams that he's on the ground. So that's the lowest level, the physical world. And then there's a ladder with angels going up and down. So you have the idea of like communication going back and forth. And really that's what angels is. The name for angels in Hebrew means a messenger. So God works much through his, not always, but much through his angelic or spiritual middle world there, up and down. So the idea of connection, which is that letter Vav that you see in the name. The Vav is a hook that connects things. And then above that, he sees a heavenly realm. And then beyond the heavenly realm is this whole idea of God before any of that was created. So when you think of heavens and heavenly realm, don't think of stars and planets and all that. That's all part of the lowest physical realm. Anything you can like observe with your eyes, touch, smell, et cetera, that's all part of the lowest realm, even outer space. That's all physical, okay? Then beyond that, as I said, it's not like physical distance, but beyond that or outside of that, and yet connected to it is the whole idea of the angelic world around us that we can't see unless you're, who is that person, Elisha and the servant and all that. He opened up his eyes and he could see, gave him a little glimpse there of what was going on. And then, of course, the heavenly world, we read about that in places in the Tanakh and all, that there's a throne room of God and all of this. So that's the basic structure of four, and one representation of it. As I said, the structure of four has many different applications, as we'll see. But the first thing to get in mind is it's based around the four-letter name of God. There's different hidden references to it, to this template in the Tanakh. One of them is over there on the right on the screen. I'm going to move some windows out of the way here. Isaiah 43:7. Oops, what did I just do? Well, that's my fault. You're still seeing it. Sorry. Isaiah 43:7 has a hidden reference to these four worlds. It says, everyone that is called, in bold there, by my name, then created, and then for my glory, formed him and made him. And these three worlds are actually called, the first world is actually called nearness. Atzilut means nearer to God. So that's that higher world that's beyond creation. But then the next three worlds are actually called Bariah, which is creation, and Yetzirah, which is formation, and Asiya, which is the world of making or being made. So they actually, the names of those worlds are actually in that verse in Isaiah, which is interesting. As we'll see, this template appears throughout the Tanakh in different ways. Jacob's ladder being another one there. I'm trying to think what comes to mind, but I'll keep moving forward here. Oh, and even the first 4 chapters of Genesis are interesting, because you have, of course, prior to creation, Elohim created, very beginning 1, Genesis 1. And then you have a story that changes over the next 3 chapters. You have the creation of this very singular being called Adam before the Garden of Eden. That's associated with the world of creation. And then Eve, Hava, gets formed, world of formation, and they're in the Garden of Eden. That's the other world. And then you have them kicked out of the garden, and they come into this physical reality that we still live in. And that's the third world of Asiya, the world of making, things being like physically made. So you see the transition of the three worlds. The existence of Adam, or the primary existence of Adam, exists first in Bariah in chapter 1, and then in the Garden of Eden story with Chava, it's the world of Yetzirah is their primary level of existence. They still exist in all these worlds, but it's considered like their main, at the moment, level of existence. And then finally, this world that we live in. Okay, so we'll go just a little bit more background on this four-letter template thing. As I said, it appears a lot of places. Here's an interesting one. It's a little confusing when you first look at it. Let's start on the right side. You'll see that image of the Yod He and the Vav He, and the image of a man. That's a standard kabbalistic model where we're made in the image of God. So this whole idea of these letters and etc. Are connected to this very idea of the image of God that we're made in according to Genesis. So that's a cute model on the right there. The temple, we're also told in places in the Tanakh and the Talmud and other places, is a relationship drawn between the idea of the body, the human body, being related to the setup of the Mishkan, or the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, and that's an interesting idea, that there's a correlation between the two, because our body, is what we use to, properly use to make connections to help us make connections to God. The temple served as an intermediary type thing too, to help us connect to God. So you have this idea here that the idea of the Yud is associated with at the top there. Let's go. The names are in the middle. So Atzilut is that higher world before creation. And I'll get to those other words in a minute. But if you look across, it connects to the Holy of Holies. And then the next level, the second letter, which is the Hey, the first letter Hey, the big wide letter, connects to the sanctuary, the holy place, which is in the building, but not the Holy of Holies, just outside of it. And then you have the courtyards, the inner courtyard, the outer courtyard, which relate to the next two levels. So you have the same idea here of these this four. And again, I want to repeat, and I'm not making any of this stuff up. It's not my stuff. This is standard Jewish Torah teaching that I just pull from different places. So, and interesting, I do occasionally throw in some New Testament verses. It's not a focus or anything like that. And it doesn't matter what you think of it. I just throw those in to show because it's Jewish writings. And there's a couple of interesting writing verses at the top and the bottom there that refer about the temple and the relationship between the temple and the body, which is interesting. So it's a Jewish teaching that there's a connection between the idea of the body and the image of God and these letters in the name, the 4-level template, etc. Back to the middle of the screen, there's underneath there's 4 pairs of words. So there's also the idea in Judaism that the soul has different levels to it. And it kind of goes like this. Everybody in the world has a basic soul, the basic nefesh. If you didn't have one, you wouldn't be walking around, you wouldn't be here. It's just kind of that driving thing we have in us to look out for ourselves and make sure we get enough to eat and think about a few, football scores or whatever. It's not, it's everybody's got that. It's not in and of itself. People aren't walking around thinking like deep spiritual thoughts all the time. This is a level of nefesh is just very physical, very concerned with just basic needs. And then sometimes there are people who at some point or another in their lives, some younger, some older, some never, start to think about, well, you know what? There's probably more to life than this. And they start thinking about spiritual ideas, spiritual concepts, trying to figure out what truth is and all that. And that's that level in between, similar to that level of the ladder with the angels going back and forth. And that's that mixed level where you're trying to figure things out and make a connection. Some people make some limited spiritual connection. They become, something they get into. Others fall deeply into some religious practices, all a variety of things that happen there. And some people, go between things, or some people try stuff for a while and then just give up. And that's that whole level of all kinds of stuff going on. But at least they're thinking about spiritual stuff. They're a step above the person living at the level of nefesh who is just worried about what's for dinner again tomorrow and the next day, etc. I'll just go over a couple more things and we'll pause for a second, see if there's any questions. And then you have people who actually really do take that seriously and pursue it to the level of making some type of connection with God. And that's not going to be the same for everybody. In fact, I would say it's not the same for anybody. And that's not only because we have a lot of different people in the world that may or may not be exposed to different levels of Torah, or just some variation of it or something in their religion. They just aren't fortunate enough to have a Tanakh drop in their lap with a teacher, but still people all around the world can make a connection to God. We have it kind of available to us, if you will, in our makeup, in our spiritual makeup. And even within like Judaism, for example, there's all kinds of range of people at different things. But once a person really does understand that there's a God, a real God, and there's God, something, that they can really hold on to and start to be the focus of their life. And we could call that like the level of the neshama, that level of connecting to the highest level that a physical being can really, normal physical being can be walking around in this world, really thinking about God on a fairly regular basis, thinking about spiritual things, and to some degree, not like 24 hours a day sitting in a cave or something, but, they're just, becomes their focal point in life becomes spiritual and not physical, put it that way. It's kind of like, what's behind everything? Are you a spiritual person that's living in physical stuff, or are you a physical person that's just feeding your face every day? So that's that level. And then that's pretty much in terms of most human beings, that do make that kind of connection, that's a pretty good thing. There are considered to be two higher levels of the soul. One is somebody who's the level of chaya, which is life. And that would pertain or correspond to that level before creation we talked about a few minutes ago. So that's why it's at the level of Atzilut. So that's a higher level outside creation. And this is somebody who's really, very saintly person. I mean, very saintly, like we call it Zadik, a righteous person who's constantly morning, noon, and night, praying and studying, looking for opportunities to do mitzvot, and educating people, and just everywhere they go, any situation, they're processing it in their mind as a spiritual thing. Everything from the moment they get up, brush their teeth, to the end of the night. It's all about God and spirituality. Everything in their life they consume with it. That's a kind of level where some people can possibly get to that. And I'm not talking about somebody that, again, hides in a cave like a monk. They could be a normal, regular person. You might not know just by walking by them and talking to them briefly, but there's something totally different going on in their makeup. Okay, and that's that level of that, and that's not a lot of people in the world. It's something to strive for. It's something to think about. Always strive. Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, right? So we're continually striving to become more like a Zadik. And if you do find people like that you have the opportunity, if you're fortunate enough to make acquaintance with somebody who you could truly see is that way. I have a friend, my mentor, who is like that. He is the person I connect to and I call for my problems all too often and stuff. And the guy, it's like you're saying, oh, he must be is he a super rabbi at a yeshiva? No, actually, he's a maintenance worker in a plant. I'm not kidding. He's a maintenance worker in a plant, and everybody looks at him like a saint. And I know him even better than that because he's been at my house every Shabbat for 20 plus years now. So it's like, I'm very blessed to have someone like that. And you can find people like that anywhere. You can find people online and all, and that are just walking at a kind of a different level, and you can always talk to them because that's the first focus. So anyhow, and there's a fifth level of the soul, which is really kind of outside the bounds of existence even. It's almost like someone who becomes a martyr or something like that for God. It's a complete unification with God. It's usually more connected, the idea, with something after you die, and hopefully at some point you're connected to God at that level. So we don't need to go there for now because we're focused on 4 and not 5 at the moment. So anyhow, so there's some more stuff there for connectivity. I think I have one more slide and then we'll leave. Oh no, we're already there. Okay. So that was the template of 4 that, like I said, we talked about it in more detail last week, and I have the slideshow and the video audio from last week are in the group, in the Torah Fundamentals group. I'm pretty sure I posted them. And what's his sounds going in and out? Hold on, let me see here. Hold on. I hope I don't need to. All right, this shows me that that it's working. Okay. So is everybody else hearing okay? And I can pause for a second here because we are about to look at the next section here. So that was a fast review because it went kind of quick, and tell me to slow down whenever. I wanted to go quick because it's kind of what we talked about last week, and I didn't want to be too repetitive. But it's in the group, so you can download it or view it. Can everybody hear me okay now? Can I get an amen? I'm getting an okay from Lorraine. All right. Hopefully everybody else is hearing me. Yep. Yep is good. 2 P's in that. Yep. All right. All right. So that's the template of 4. And because it has to do with our, these levels of reality, of existence, it's throughout the Torah. So in the Tanakh, so when the Tanakh's talking about, physical things down here, or the angelic world, or it's talking about things like at the higher levels, visions of heaven and all, you can get a grasp here that these things are, you could say, separate but connected. You never want to say they're just separate. It's not like there's a brick wall between the two, but they are distinct in that respect, that they do have different characteristics and things. So a concept or even the language in the Tanakh, you have to understand, like, well, what's it talking about? Like, what level is it talking about? Because the same words can have, or the same ideas can have slightly different they'll have something in common at each level, but you know what I'm saying? They'll have some things slightly different. It's almost like when you say, you can say you're close to someone. Okay, so if I'm standing next to you, I'm close to you. If you're a dear friend of many years and we share emotional things, I'm close to you emotionally. That's different than standing next to you. Or perhaps you're a colleague, like a scientist, and we both are working on scientific projects and we think alike intellectually. We're close. So there's, the word close, you'd see how it means like very different things depending on how it's used. So, but there's still some similarity that it means, that you have an affinity for something someone else does, or it's still, a general idea of closeness in all those three cases, but it's different. Same here with the worlds. So you'll see a concept like judgment or something. And it's like, well, what does that mean down here versus in the angelic world versus in the heavenly realms? And it's, similar but different. So don't try to, force things is one thing. I always say hang on loosely. There's a tendency in Western culture, especially if people have been around that and, Christianity, etc., that everything's got to be black and white. Everything has to have an exact definition. This is what I believe. It's exactly this. And I'm so secure in my faith now because I know exactly that. And it's like, that's just a recipe for disaster because we only have a partial view, first of all, of anything. But these things can mean very different things depending on circumstances. So, all right. So the basic idea here in the next template is this template of 10. As I said, the four worlds of existence are kind of like, the different, I don't know what's the best way to express it here. Like I said, different levels of existence. And here we have something that is kind of, I guess you could call this the blueprint or the schematic if you're an electrical guy. The DNA map, whatever you want, spiritual DNA map, something like that exists at all of those levels. Okay, so these things we're going to talk about now, this next template of 10 actually exists everywhere. So it exists in all four of those levels and throughout. And all this is basically is over time or just through Jewish tradition, it's been passed down that there are basically 10 characteristics or emanations related to how we perceive God or how God functions within creation that we can kind of, sort of understand a little bit about. If we work real hard, we'll never understand God perfectly because his ways are not our ways. But and these 10 emanations, the Hebrew word Sephirot is plural, Sephirah is singular, as you see on the screen. And they make up what's called the image of God. It's in Genesis 1, we're made in the image of God. B'Tselem Elohim is the term. This gives us, it's not just human beings that are made in this image of God, everything's made in the image of God, but human beings especially are. Because we are, we're the culmination of, well, hopefully we should be the culmination of what God has created. And these 10 emanations, in one sense, you can look at them and define them kind of individually to get a general idea of what's talking about. But then again, like I said, the definitions change depending on how they're being applied and where they're being applied. But you can get some rough ideas. But then you also have the idea that they're connected. And, as one connects to the other, it's like when you mix two flavors of ice cream, you get something a little bit different. You put a little raspberry in the chocolate. Now you get chocolate, but it's got a little raspberry taste to it. So when these, don't quote me on that one. I'll have to delete that from this thing. So you get this idea here of how they interact. So 2 or 3 or 4, different things and these things kind of relate to your personality type, to human nature. So you're not like just pure judgment, but you might have feelings of pure judgment sometime, or you might have feelings of judgment, but you're also a little bit of mercy is mixed in, so you're not getting too mad. So these things play off each other in terms of within us, human beings, but they also link and correspond and work in different ways throughout all of creation, the angelic world, and so on. So it's a fascinating array of combinations, if you will. And I always like to joke that when you take things like the what's it called now? The Myers-Briggs personality assessment there. I think it has like 14 personality types or something. And then there's like a DISC, D-I-S-C assessment, and it's got a few personality types. So I was calculating that if each of these 10 emanations, each of these 10 Sephirot is impacted by the others, and as well as impacting itself. If you take all of those and you go 10 times 10 times 10, and then there's like 4 worlds of existence that you go through. So now you got to do it again 4 times. It comes out to this number that's like 10 to the 40th power. So that's like a 1 with 40 zeros after it. So if somebody ever tells you you're 1 in a million, tell them that's a gross understatement, because there's really 10 to the 40th power possibilities of combinations with these things. So that's just a little math on the side. You don't have to write that down. It's just having fun with it. So this is the roadmap. This is the blueprint. When you put them together in this particular design that you see, and there's variations of this design. I'll show you some tonight, and there's a lot more. But this is the main one. It doesn't stray too much from this. And when you put them together, the name or nickname it's been given is the Tree of Life, Etz Chaim. So this whole idea of Tree of Life, which is a term you see in other places in the Bible in different contexts, but it's called Etz Chaim. It's called the Tree of Life. All right. So if you hear that in this context, you'll know what it means. So let's look a little bit differently at the same diagram. And what I've added here on the left, if you look at the diagram, is the English names. And the problem with English is, or the problem with any Western language trying to convey Semitic thought, Hebrew thought, is it doesn't work. The way words work is differently between the languages. But, we can get, again, some ideas. And if you do enough reading and get enough information, you can get a pretty good idea of that. Of what it means. As long as someone's explaining, you'll know what it means. So, and as I said earlier, this map, this Etz Chaim map, is how they're mapped out. And of course, when you put a bunch of circles on a page, you got to draw lines between them, right? So there's these paths that are between the Sephirot on a traditional diagram. And if you count, but I'll save you the time, there's 22 paths total. Of course, you might. The astute in the group will say, aren't there 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet? And that's correct, there are. And so you've got 22 different paths, each one associated with the letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And again, this is the most common diagram, most common view. There's some other traditions that are a little different in terms of like the numbers or the letters used on the path is one, but they're lesser known traditions. There's nothing wrong with them. These are just different expressions of our best view of spiritual things. So quickly go down these things. So yeah, there's 10 circles or 10 Sephirot and 22 paths between them. And when you add 10 and 22, it's 32. 32 is the numerical value or gematria of the word for heart, which is interesting. And there's a book called Sefer Yetzirah. It's an old kabbalistic text. The ideas in it are attributed to Abraham. He didn't probably write it, but the ideas brought down are attributed all the way back to Abraham. And this old reference, not like just lately, there's very ancient references that attribute it back to Abraham. So it goes way back. And it in there, there's reference to like things like 32 levels of consciousness and all this. So this is basically our roadmap to understanding things. And the terms if you will go very quickly through this diagram because we got some more fun ones to look at. But at the very top, and I borrowed this diagram off the internet, so the spelling and things is weird in places, but I grabbed something that looked approximately close because I didn't want to start drawing all these things from scratch. So the idea at the top, you have Keter, which is a crown, and if you think of a crown as above your body, it's not part of your body. It's an important distinction and thought to put in your mind now because that's going to come up a lot later. Keter is very much, it's part of the diagram, but it's very separate from everything else. It's considered, extremely removed in a sense because it is not actually part of the body, whereas you can associate the other 9 with the body. The next 2, right and left, from right to left, are Chochmah, which is wisdom, and Binah, which is understanding. Now, wisdom here is not like an accumulation of information, like when you think of an old person as wise because they've been around so long. Wisdom here carries some different meaning, and that's an important distinction to make, that there's kind of a unique vocabulary to the Torah, but especially to these parts of the Torah, like Kabbalah, that had kind of, you need to understand what these words tend to mean. And they can mean different things, but they often don't mean like the typical meaning of something. So it just takes a little study. That's all. Chokhmah here carries with it a sense of the past, so we can have some measure of regular wisdom there, but it also has the idea of something very singular, like a starting point. Okay, so whereas Keter is beyond everything, Chokhmah is the real starting point, if you will, for things that we can grasp. Very singular, and then Bina on the right is very has all the details. So I like to think of this as, in fact, it is called like the father and mother. Chokhmah is the father, the masculine side on the right, and Bina is the feminine Ima side on the left. So if you think of it in terms like the husband comes home and announces to the family, I got a great idea. We're going on a family vacation. And he shouts that, and the kids scream. Everyone's happy, and dad's on the couch thinking he's so smart. And then mom jumps in and says, well, hold on a second. We got to talk about, time off from work. We got to talk about school. We got to talk about what we're going to pack. We got to talk about the dates. And she breaks it down into all those pieces, right? And that's Chokhmah and Bina right there, right? Chokhmah is that spark, that singular idea. Hey, vacation. And Bina is the other side, says, whoa, slow down. We got to break this down and figure this out. So that's kind of like the overarching mother and father concepts, if you will. And then we'll look at these in more detail in a minute. So I'm just going to walk through these really fast. So Chesed and Gevorah below that, right and left. And then Tiferet, which is horribly spelled that's terrible. Tifaret. Beauty, not in terms of being pretty, but beauty in terms of harmony and balance. That's why it's in the middle. And then the others are even harder to define in English. Victory and splendor, Netzat and Hod. I'll cover what those mean actually in a minute. And then the last two in the middle, the foundation, and the bottom is kingdom, Malkut. So I'm going to go, this kind of repeats on the next slide, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it here. But that's the basic structure here on this slide with paths. So you have 10 circles, 10 Sephirot, which are these emanations of God, and then the idea that they're connected somehow, or can have connections somehow, depending on the circumstances. So that's what the paths are there mostly for. The letters in the paths aren't usually that much of a big deal, believe it or not, in kabbalistic writings. They don't come up that much at all, but they're there. So there's possibilities that they could be revealing to some degree, but most stuff is written just around the emanations themselves and more concepts as opposed to the actual letters. So let's see what's on the next slide, because I've completely forgotten. Okay, so when we look at this, let me go back real quick. If you notice here, that's the structure, and just get that imprinted in your mind. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next slide because it's a little different, but you can see the structure on the right kind of inlaid on the those three pillars. So one of the very basic concepts of the structure is that if you look at it like this, there's a left side, a right side, and a middle. Pretty simple. And what's associated with these sides, the best thing, again, is try not to make a real specific applications to this because you'll get confused later on. Keep it very general at first. The right side, I like down at the bottom there. Underneath male and female, you see form and force. To me, that's the best first definition to put in your mind. The right side is like expansion. It's making something happen. And the left side is form. It's like, okay, something's happening now. We got to give it some structure, some form. So if you're going to have a cup of coffee and you grab the coffee mug and you start pouring into the coffee mug, and that's the side of force. You're making it happen. And you better have the side of form ready to stop pouring a half inch from the top or whatever, because you're going to spill it all over your hand if you don't. That's the side of form. So force and form are active or passive, if you will, expansion, restriction. There's different ways to word that, and they're similar but different, again, as I said earlier. So, that's just the best thing to keep in mind when you're dealing with the right and the left side is that. That's the first concept before you get into real specifics of things like mercy versus judgment, because that's a very specific thing. So mercy is like someone goes on trial, and if the judge in the trial always said, you know what, I'm merciful, let him go. Another person comes up, he robbed a bank, I'm merciful, let him go. It's like, that would be horrible. You can't just have just pure mercy, because it doesn't know when to say no or hold restriction. And on the other hand, if it's pure judgment and everybody that came up there was sent to the gallows, that would be bad too. So there's a balance between mercy and judgment. But again, you see mercy is very giving and proactive, and judgment is making decisions and restriction and constraint. So again, it goes back to the original idea of force and form. And these are associated with, again, this is not, and I hate the terms in this diagram, this is male and female. I don't like that. I would use masculine and feminine, because not to confuse people. This is not, oh, boys are on the right, girls are on the left, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. It's not that. Because every human being has all of these 10 characteristics, all of these 10 Sephirot functioning within them. And believe it or not, they function within you at all 4 of those levels we talked about, because you have a physical self, so they function at you at the physical level. You have an emotional level, you have an intellectual level, and then you have beyond that, you have a spiritual level. And all 10 of these godly characteristics are present in all of these levels within every human being, okay, to different degrees. And that's the image of God that you're made in Genesis 1. So I prefer masculine and feminine. So masculine on the right is more associated with, proactive, hey, let's go, let's do it, kind of on that side of things. And the feminine is more of the, you can contemplate and look at the details and yada, yada. And generally speaking, and it depends on, culture and when we're talking about, generally speaking, men tend to be a little bit more on the right side, and a little bit, and most women tend to be a little bit more on the left side characteristics, just a bit, and not always the case. There are some women and men that tend to, have more balance, or even more the other way. But they call masculine and feminine for the primary, not because it's a gender thing, but because one is more aggressive and proactive, and the other is more receptive and contemplative. Okay, so that's why you need both. That's why it works out good that way. Then you have the middle column, which is considered a column of I guess you could say I can't say it, equilibrium, kind of a balance between the two. As I said, Keter at the top, which I don't know if you can see my little cursor there. Keter would be that top one. There's kind of beyond our creation, but it's, we'll cover more about what that means. But the middle ones are kind of a balance between them. In fact, that it's kind of hard to figure this, but over here, these, what am I looking at here? Okay, yeah. These two here are kind of the mercy. This is chesed. If I actually go back, I can show you. It'll look better on this diagram. There we go. Don't get dizzy. So chesed, mercy here, and gevurah, judgment on the left. The middle is balance, beauty in terms of balance, tiferet. Tiferet is also called rachamim, which is compassion. So, if someone comes before you and they've done something wrong, maybe your child, and you're upset and you want to punish them, but you love them, you don't, and so you find that balance between the two. That's compassion. It's you can't let them get away with it, but you're going to be nice, right? So that's tiferet in the middle. That's the balance between those two. And the same down here between Netzachot and Yesod, only slightly different. We'll go over that in a bit, so I don't want to be repetitive. So anyhow, you have the basic idea here when you look at the diagram that there's a left or right in the middle. So again, pretty simple concept, right? Left, right, and center. The two extremes balanced in the middle, and they all work together. So let's go to one more here. I'm going to pause 1 second. What questions do people have so far? Please type it in, or just go ahead and grab the mic. But I'm taking a sip of water. Shall I continue? I hope I haven't put too many folks to sleep yet. Okay, we're going to continue. Okay. I said we're going to be looking at this in a number of different ways. And believe me, this is just going to scratch the scratching of the fingernail tonight. This is just an overview. But if you start with a good overview, and then the rest, you're less likely to get mixed up with, because this is a lot of stuff here. We're talking about how God functions in the world and how we understand that. So it's As I say, rocket science is but a subset of this. All right, so here's another view of the 10 emanations or 10 Sephirot, okay? And what's interesting here is you have a structure, but within the structure, there's little structures, specific ones that how these things relate together, very, very well-established ones, if you will. There's still other combinations that can occur at different times, but there's some that are very set in terms of how things function. And the first division, and I hate to use the word division because there's no real division, but how we look at it. The first division is as top 3 ones, and then there's the bottom 7 ones, okay? And the top 3 ones are known as, they're related to the idea of the, my screen here. I don't know what windows are popping up here. I'm sorry. So the top 3 are related to it's called the Mochin, M-O-C-H-I-N, and if you're going to transliterate it, Mochin, which is like the mind or brains of God, if you will. It's kind of the overarching, overseeing things that are back in how we were created, and they're always there, and they kind of set the structure in terms of a left, a right, and a center. But they're not the things that we deal with on a regular basis within our lives, within physical creation, but they're nonetheless, they're kind of like the top of the pillars, if you will. If you remember that left, right, and center, they kind of consider like the top of the pillars, okay? Especially Binah and Chokhmah, the mom and the dad. They're kind of the mother and the father there. And this diagram is messed up. Oh, look at this. Somebody made a mistake on this diagram. I took this off the internet, and I just noticed it. Binah is on the wrong side. Can you believe that? Well, I didn't notice that before. This is what you get for snagging stuff off the internet, huh? Yeah, Binah and Chokhmah are switched. Okay, that is weird. Somebody would take the time to do this and get it wrong, and I didn't catch it because I grabbed it too quick. Okay, so we're going to flip Binah and Chokhmah here. Hey, wait, I have a pen on this tool thing here. Let's see here. Let me find annotate. Okay, so this over here, can I write with this thing? It's terrible to try to write with. Oh, I can't do this. This is too painful. All right, that's Chokhmah on this side. Right there. That should be Chokhmah. And over here on the left is Binah. All right, so that is totally bizarre. So having switched those in our minds, yeah, I know. And I'm recording this. I have to find the source for this and send them a note. Where was I? So the top 3 are kind of, like I said, like related to the mind of God, and back there in the far distant but connected to us spiritual background, whatever you want to call it. The bottom 7 are called midot, which actually means like measures, and these are the things we deal with. They're also called the emotive Sephirot, but they're not all about emotion like we think of emotion either, so we'll get to that. But they're the ones that we deal with regularly, okay? And so that's the first distinction, is there's the top 3 when you look at the whole structure, but most of the time throughout the Bible, when we're talking about, interactions with God and humans back and forth, we're talking about the 7 that function together down there, okay? And that 7 breaks down even further, as we're going to see in a second, okay? I'm just going to get another picture, Diana. They're out there. I just grabbed this one because I thought the circles were cool. It was nice and handy. So I grabbed this one and threw it in, and then I'm looking at it going, like, wait a minute, what is going on? Not only is the spelling horrid, but anyhow, like I said, there's so much stuff out there that people jump on the bandwagon and don't know what they're talking about. Anyhow, let me undo my annotating pen. Back to the mouse. Okay, and let's go to the next screen. Okay, so the 7 below are the ones that we deal with a lot. So we're going to look at these 7. I got to get rid of my annotating. Will it go away if I do this? No, it won't. Hold on, I got those dumb things on the screen here. Erase? I don't have to erase. There must be an undo, right? Wonderful. I don't usually use this thing, so. Nope, that ain't happening. I'm trying to see if I can make this go away. Hey, I did. Cool. Good old select and delete. So the 7 lower Sephirot, which are the 7 you see on the right, which are the subject of most discussions on how we relate to God, how we try to correct things in our life, in our souls, how we relate to our fellow human beings, etc. Those are the ones that we focus on. So you have two ideas here. You have the idea of the 10 being this complete structure that includes everything, including like existence and pre-existence and whatever. And then you have the idea of the 7 that deals strictly like within creation and how we function. So there's a concept of 10, but within the concept of 10, there's the template of 7. Okay. And so when you talk about 7, of course, if you read the Bible at least one time, you know the number 7 comes up a heck of a lot. And people make a big deal out of it. And there's a lot of non-Jewish traditions involving numbers and all that I just don't bother with. So try to stick with, kosher sources. But the number 7 has to do with how things function in creation in this world and in ourselves, very simply. And of course, starts right at the beginning, the 7 days of creation. Hint, hint, there's 6 days and then one more, right? As you know, if you've read the creation account, there's 6 days of creating and then a 7th day, Sabbath. That's going to come up in a second here. Another concept related to 7 is there are 7 particular people in the Bible. Yes, they're all men. There's also 7, one lesser known one with 7 prophetesses, women on it. But there's 7 particular ones that are critical in the storyline of the Bible. And they are each associated with these, one of the 7 Sephirot. And you see their names to the right there. You start at the top right and work your way over to the left and down. So it goes Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, Joseph, David, in terms of the structure. That's obviously not the chronological order exactly, because Joseph is showing up there after Moses and Aaron, but it's what they're associated with in terms of what these things represent. So it's not in English, so I'm going to have to fix a lot of these slides, but Abraham is where it says chesed, so that's loving kindness, hospitality, being outgoing. That was Abraham, right? Then you go to Isaac, that's gevurah, that's restriction and holding back, and Isaac never left the land of Israel, and Isaac had his bride chosen for him and stuff like that. And Jacob was the balance between the two. Moses was on the right, very proactive, making things happen. Aaron is on the left. He's very contemplative, solved all the problems. Joseph is that connecting piece in the middle where he brings Egypt and Israel and the family and everything together. And then David at the bottom, Malkut is kingdom, and Malkut is associated, and David is associated with kingdom. So that's kind of why they're there. We talk about this a lot when we do the Ushpizin study. It also comes up during the Omer count. The Ushpizin studies at Sukkot, and the tradition at Sukkot in the fall, tabernacles, is to each of the 7 days of Sukkot, you welcome one of these people in, starting with Abraham. You welcome them into your sukkah, into your meeting place. And what that means is nothing spooky. We're not conjuring up spirits. It's simply saying that the focus of the day are the characteristics associated with that particular person. So on day 1, you're focusing on loving kindness in Abraham and his life, and you study and read that. And on day 2, you go to Isaac and so on. So it's a great way to learn things, because there's a lot of deep information about these people outside of the Bible and Jewish Torah literature. So that's 7 days in the fall, and in the spring it's 7 weeks. And 7 weeks, we focus not exclusively, or not so much actually, on the 7 patriarchs. We look more at the characteristics and internal to ourselves to try and how they interrelate and make change. So as I said earlier, each of these Sephirot, each of these characteristics always has some type of relationship with the others, just different degrees. So same thing when you're talking just with the lower 7, they still have relationship with the other 6 and also like an aspect of themselves. So there's always like 7 times 7. That's why you have 49 days in the Omer count. So you start with Chesed, and you look at each one of those through Chesed, and then you go to Gevurah, and you look at all 7 through Gevurah, and so on. It takes you through the 49 days of the Omer count. Okay. This particular diagram on the right is a little different in one respect than the others I showed you. The others, if you recall, there was a line going from down where Aaron is down to David, and a line from Moses down to David. There was those connecting lines. You'll see this style of diagram too. to emphasize an important concept. And again, like I said, these things change depending on what's being talked about. That everything goes through Yesod here, this one above Malkut, the one I'm kind of wiggling over here, where it says Joseph. Everything passes through that Sephirah. And when obviously, if you think in terms of a faucet or something, if the faucet's working well, things will go smoothly through. And if it's not, there's going to be a problem. And we'll discuss that in a minute. But it works both ways, things coming down to us and things going up to the heavenlies, like prayer. And that particular Sephirah Yesod has a lot to do with our behavior, particularly moral behavior and things of that nature. Even included within that would be sexual purity, fidelity, and things of that nature. That's why Joseph is there, because he withstood Potiphar's wife. That's one of the reasons he's there. I shouldn't say it's the only reason. It's one of the reasons. So, if you're trying to do something good, but there's sin in your life, it's going to be a break over there, and you're not going to be making a good connection. If you want to think of it in terms of like a schematic, there's a problem there. The two on the left, Aaron and Moses, which are Chod on the left and Netzah on the right, are called the wings of Yesod. So they function closely with Yesod, as I mentioned earlier, how the two on the left and right above function with Jacob, Chesed and Geburah function with Tiferet in the middle, and then the next three below, where it says Moses, Aaron, are Netzah and Hod, they balance or come together. We're in the middle of Yesod. So they call it the wings of Yesod, is one of the little nicknames, if you will, that it's given in literature. So everything comes through Yesod. Yesod is also, actually, I'm going to save that cool part in a minute. There's names of God associated with all of these circles, with all of these spheres. And one you'll see in a minute, where Yesod is associated with Shaddai, El Shaddai, which is God the provider. So if you think of provision coming through there, and you go back to what I said a minute ago, where if there's something wrong, if there's a clog in the pipe, or if there's a break in the manufacturing line, it's not going to go through there. There's a problem at that level. There's a problem at that level of Shaddai, of provision. All right, let's go down to the next one. Lots of fun slides. So yeah, you're going to love this one. What I do at work, yeah. This slide was taken, some of you may have seen it way back. This slide was taken from my desk at work. At lunch, dessert, don't show my wife. She's probably listening. So a propensity to grab a bag of M&Ms once in a while. And a little OCD thing here going on. But they're fun to draw like little diagrams with and stuff. So here we have one with my M&Ms that I put down. And I found this photo as I was flipping through to do this presentation. And I said, I got to use that. So this is the structure of 10, as we've seen already. I did color code it a little bit. The top three, as I mentioned earlier, are the intellect of God, or the mind of God, I should say, the brains, mochin, all right? And then the next six, which would be the green and the blue together, okay? The next six, oops, I messed that up here, hold on. The next six here are, I just want to close a window here in the way, sorry. Open up my chat box here so I don't, hold on one second, folks. I'm trying to get my chat box to behave here, but it's, it keeps opening up way too big, and I don't want it to do that. Oh, there we go. Okay. So the next six are a group together, and they're associated with that letter Vav. So just to review something here, actually, I don't even know if I mentioned this, but the one on the right here in the yellow that I'm circling is where wisdom is, Chokhmah. And that's actually associated with that first letter Yud in the name in certain capacities. And then the first letter Hey would be over here, your Abba and your Ima, your father, mother. And then they had a kid. No, actually the concept of here, of these six in the middle, which is your Jacob's ladder here, this whole range in the middle here, because we're down here. This red one down here is associated with us down here in the physical world. So these 6 here make up that middle range of the Vav, of the ladder with the angels going back and forth. There's a lot of ways of referring to this. It's actually referred to as Ben, or son. This is the son. So you have the concept of Abba here, father, Ima here, and son in the middle here. These 6 together are considered a group. So it's the personae. These are the persona. Hebrew is partsuf or partsufim. So if you hear that word, I don't have it on the screen, but the idea of associating these kind of ideas we relate to, like father, mother, son, bride, groom, those are partsufim. Just ways for us to understand something about God is what those things are. So the partsuf, or the middle range there, another weird term you'll see is on the left here, ze'ir anpin. It's the strangest term I've ever seen. And it really means like a lesser countenance, or a more merciful face, if you will. It's kind of a reflection of something of the less merciful face, or the greater face above. But what's mostly interesting is associated with the idea of the groom, the bridegroom, or the son, either or, depending on the context of what you're talking about, which of course leads to the bottom red one, which I did flip over intentionally to show the M, because it's Malkut. So the bottom red one, and I couldn't color code these perfectly because M&Ms only come in certain colors. So the bottom one, Malkut, is associated with the bride or the daughter, either one depending on the context. And that's the last letter, Hey, in the name. So just to quickly review, over here on the right, top right yellow here is the Yod. Top left yellow would be associated with the first letter, Hey. The next 6 together, and there's a reason there's 6, because they function as a kind of like a filter, if you will. These are the Vav, which is like, you can almost think of it a ladder coming down, right? Which it is. It's Jacob's ladder, the actual ladder in the dream. And then Malkut, or kingdom, down here is associated with our physical world. There's a spiritual aspect to it, of course, or we wouldn't exist. But there's a close relationship between, this world we're living in with our bodies and our 5 senses and all of that, and in that world there. Okay, so there's my M&Ms, and then within one more division, I said there were structures within the structures. So you had the 10 broken up into the 3 at the top and then the 7 below. We discussed that. Now you have another break. You have 6 and 1. The 6 here in the middle are the bridegroom, and or the son, and then the bottom one by itself. The 7th is the bride. And by the way, you think of 6 here, right? Number 6, and the Vav is the 6th letter. It means 6. It's the 6th letter in Hebrew alphabet. So that's your husband, right? The groom. Then the 7th one, there's not 7 here, but it's the 7th one, is the bride. What does the bride do at the wedding? She circles the groom, right? The 7th circles the 6th, and that whole tradition is based around Jewish mystical teachings that you're looking at right now. So that's why the bride circles the 6th, the groom. The 7 goes around the 6. And the whole connection between 7 and 6 is a whole other area we'll talk on different night, maybe in the K3 room or K4 room. We'll get into that whole idea of the 7 and the 6 together, because that's a very significant combination. All right. Now, the last part is one more subgroup. Within the 6, they actually split into 2. And we talked about it sort of a minute ago. The top 3 in green and the next 3 in blue. And the top 3, which is Chesed on the right here, Gevurah on the left here, and Tiferet. If you take the first sounds or letters, Chesed would generally be started with a CH in English usually, Gevurah with a G, and Tiferet with a T. So it gives you an acronym, Chagat, which is simply Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet. That's all. And then the next 3 is Netzah on the right, Hod on the left, and Yesod here. And that gives you Nehi. So there's 2 different things. Chagat tends to, and they're all considered the midot or emotional attributes, but the top 3, Chagat, tend to point you back toward God, if you will, and the concepts behind, like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, what those things mean, like your decision making process and how you're going to do something based on mercy, judgment, and balance. Okay. And then the next three, nechi, is how you actually go the other direction, like toward your neighbor, toward the world. All right. And how you put them into play. If you go on the website Aish, A-I-S-H, Aish.com, Aish talks a lot about this stuff. They have a great section on it. They call these lower ones here tactical, T-A-C-T-I, C-A-L, tactical, like in a military term, tactical Sephirot, because these are the ones that actually put into action, and then the action occurs down here. So these three green ones, Hagat, connect you back toward your roots, if you will, and these three here point you out toward the world and your neighbor. So they all work together as a unit, but it gives you a little bit more idea of how this whole system works. And again, we're applying it right now a little bit to how we think in our actions as humans, but the concepts are much broader and can relate to a lot of other things in the world and in the spiritual worlds, etc. But it's easy to understand it in terms of ourselves and how we function. All right. Again, I'm going to pause here for a second. You guys are all quiet and shy, so I'm assuming you are still awake, and this isn't too crazy yet. Questions or comments, please type it in or take the mic if you want. Here, we can take a 30-second pause or longer. Maybe do another slide or so, and then just take a 2-minute break if somebody needs to get a drink or something. Or awake still. Good. Okay. We got a few people here, which is good. All right. So let me see if I reviewed here. So the structure is broken from 7 down into a 6 and a 1, which is the groom and the bride. Zer Aaron Pin means lesser countenance, lower face. It's a weird term. But the main thing to understand is the 6 function as a unit, which sounds weird because the others are more just 1, 1 and 1 and 1. But those 6, the letter Vav means 6. Think of it like the ladder going down, Jacob's ladder, because it's exactly what it does represent. So it's kind of good symbolism there. And so you have the triad in here, and you have 3 triads. You have the upper triad of the mind, of the brains. You have the triad in here, which is you and your emotive attributes, how they relate back to that. Then you and your emotive attributes, how they relate toward your neighbor in life, this direction. And then Malkut is where everything dumps down into Malkut. In fact, Malkut is totally receptive. Malkut is all these things like a pinball, or not pinball, is that the right thing? Yeah, like a pinball game coming down. It all drops down into this reality, Malkut, somewhere. Okay. All right. We're going to need a bathroom break soon. Let's see what's on the next one. Ooh, okay. Yeah, I'll just put the screen up. I'm going to put this up. Ironically, I put this on here without even realizing this is kind of in the Torah portion this week, isn't it? Betzalel. Total coincidence. Well, there are no total coincidences, as we know, but still totally weird that I threw a Betzalel slide in here. I'm like, do I want this or not? And I almost pulled it out because I'm like, I don't know if it's getting too off the track. And then I realized, it's the Torah portion, so it must be meant to be. I'm going to leave this out. Let's take a 2-minute bathroom break right now. Everybody, bathroom break, water break, just for a couple minutes. Go ahead. I'm just going to leave this on the screen. I won't talk about it much. You can go ahead and read what's on there if you want to stay. Or I'm going to go myself. Be back in like 30, 40 seconds. Grab something and we'll continue. So don't go away. Just hang in there and run and get what you need, and we'll resume in about a minute or two. Okay. I'm back, but I'm not going to jump into it too quick here. Give people a minute. Am I going too fast? I tend to talk fast anyhow, often. I just want to make sure that this is not, I know this is, and I guess it depends too if you've seen some of this stuff before or not, or a lot of it or little of it or whatever. So this is being recorded and the slideshow and all, and then we'll put it in the group, and that'll be a great place to like look at it leisurely. I'll put the slideshow independent of this whole room, so you don't have to hear me talk. You can just look at the slides. There'll be an option for both. And same with the other one I did that for, and we'll probably do that for any room that we have slides. And then we can have you can type in questions at your leisure during the week or whatever, or in the future in the group. So, if it's a little quick now, just hang in there. There'll be some fun things that might make you go, right? And we can talk more about them later and for the next 100 years. Okay. So, assuming people are slowly on their way back here, I brought Betzalel in. Extremely interesting character. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but he's like 13 years old, according to the Jewish tradition, when he's brought into the picture to help Moses put the tabernacle together, which is interesting because you have the idea that there's these instructions, right? The Torah, you can read some of these instructions, and you have Moses. He's the guy commissioned to, hey, Moses, you're the project manager. But we're going to have this 13-year-old kid here who's going to kind of, instruct you or help you understand the instructions, Moses. So it's one thing to have the instructions, and it's another thing to really get some of the intricacies. So this kid, Betzalel, who's like 13 years old, is brought into the story. It's crazy when you understand how old he is. And it's said about him in that verse in Exodus. And there's an interesting, I just thought of this. The Hebrew name of the book is Shemot, right? If you're not familiar, Shemot in English, Shemot, okay? And in Bibles, you see Exodus, but that's not the correct interpretation at all of what Shemot means. Shem means name. Shemot is the plural, names. So it should be the book of names, but we call it the book of Exodus. That's pretty weird, isn't it? But it makes you think, what's in a name, right? Well, in this case, everything is in a name. We'll get to that in a second. So here's what it says about Betzalel. I filled him with the Spirit of God. Now, this is God speaking. Filled him with the Spirit of God. Check that off the list. And then wisdom, understanding, knowledge, and all manner of workmanship. So what you see here basically is, and I mentioned a few minutes ago, there was that whole original idea of the 4 levels, the template of 4. And I don't know if you remember from the very first slide, I said there's a hidden 5th, or I don't know if I even mentioned it, but that letter Yud has a little tiny spot you can't see in the Yud. You put your pen down, there's a little dot, and then you make the Yud. So it's there, but it's not. That's an idea there that there's something beyond existence even. That there's a concept, you can call it pre-existence. So even before these ideas of Elohim and Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh, and all these things, and all of that, Sephirot, before any of these things, which are before creation, before even that, there's like something that's not a thing, if you will. There's just God, if you will. So there's a level of pre-existence hidden that we can't even touch. We don't even have any way to access this till the Olam Haba, the world to come. But anyhow, that relates to that Spirit of God in the bowl there, okay? And then you get the level of wisdom, which is, as we saw earlier, Abba, or before creation. Then understanding, which is Binah. The words are in the Hebrew there, a slight variation on Binah. I forget the exact word, but you can see the word is in there, Binah, in the Hebrew. And so there you go, right? 1, 2, 3. Knowledge is da'at. Da'at here, we didn't cover da'at yet because I'll have to explain why, but it's a, when we're looking at things from God's, as we're doing now, we're looking at things from God's perspective, if you will, from God toward us. We start at Keter, that top one, and go down. Okay. We don't really understand much about Keter, but that's where it starts. When we look the other direction, as you would say, from the bottom up, going back toward God, us trying to connect that direction, that tree of life diagram takes on a slightly different look, in that we really can't grasp Keter, but there's something called da'at, or knowledge, that we can connect to. So when you're talking about it from the other direction, from God down, you refer to Keter, which is hidden away with God. When you talk about it from our direction back toward God, you talk about da'at in place of Keter. Da'at is like the manifestation of Keter, if you will, in existence, that we can kind of, get some kind of idea about. So it's called knowledge. It means knowledge, da'at means to connect. You see it in the Tanakh, and it's at all levels. Remember, I said words can mean different things at different levels. So when Adam and Eve have relations, it says Adam knew his wife. Hada'at, da'at is in there because he's connecting physically with his wife. And then Daniel 12:4, I think it is. Yeah, Daniel 12:4 says at the end of days, da'at will increase. This kind of, this connectivity to God will increase, is what he's saying, and so on. So the word has different but similar meanings, as we talked about. So da'at represents the knowledge. In this case, would represent that next world with all the ones right below it. If you look, I don't have a diagram handy now, but it would be the six together would be represented here by da'at. And then manner of workmanship, physical workmanship, is the lowest world. So those four worlds are in this verse describing Betzalel. And the interesting tidbit here, this is not in the notes, this is extra points, extra bonus here, is what's in a name, because Shemot means names. So here's a significant one. The numerical value of Betzalel is 153. Now, what does that mean? And there's a weird sense of connecting things here. And you never try to prove a doctrine using numbers, gematria. That's wrong. People do that. It's silly and it's wrong. You either have something that's an established teaching, and then you can support it, if you will, or find some interesting, details using gematria. It's considered the grass around the garden, if you will. But you never start with numbers and try to make something. That you could do that all day and night, and it's like craziness, and people do that, and it's terrible. But having said that, there's some things we know. Because Betzalel has the spirit of God, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. It's an interesting combination of words. His numerical value is 153. Well, let's start with Moses. First of all, Moses' mother gives birth, and the Torah text says that she looks upon him, and he saw that he was good. And the word good is tov, and the numerical value of tov is 17. So what's that mean? Okay, well, if you take all the numbers from 1 to 17, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, all the way up to plus 17, yes, they add up to 153. What does that mean? Okay, there's a connection here. Okay, so Moses has this 153 hidden within his description of being tov, being good. There's a tradition in Judaism that says Jethro had 7 names and Moses had 10 names. And that tradition goes on to say that Moses' primary name, his Hebrew birth name, because remember, Pharaoh's daughter named him Moses, right? That was not his birth name. Moses' Hebrew birth name was allegedly, possibly Tovia, based on the fact that he was Tov. And this midrash talk about this. So, but aside from that, so there's this connection between Moses' name and Betzalel's name that is, I'm not making this up, by the way. This is all found in Torah literature. Again, as I said earlier, if I have my own crazy idea, I'll let you know it's mine. So there's this weird connection here too. And then you have this idea, Rebecca mentioned it, that there's this obscure, bizarre mention in the book of John in the New Testament. It talks about them pulling in fish and the net, they couldn't get any fish. And Yeshua shows up and says, put your net on the other side, guys. And they're like, okay, we'll do that. What could that possibly do? And they pull up fish, they go on the shore, and somebody counts the fish. I don't know why you'd count the fish, I guess to tell the people. And there's 153 fish, John tells us. It's like, okay, that's nice. Why does he mention that? Now, if you know anything about John's gospel, you know it's very different than all the others. John's gospel is a highly kabbalistic text from beginning to end, midrashic kabbalistic text. There's stuff in there every chapter that's just like, crazy. And so why does he mention 153? Because that happens to be the number of Betzalel and the number of Moses, if you will, hidden away in Moses. So it's a significant number known in Jewish kabbalistic tradition. So John is making a direct reference to that. Okay, earlier I told you that you had a structure of 10, which includes everything, and a structure of 7 that includes what we deal with in this world. And there's the thing in Judaism, in the Zohar actually, that talks about how, well, you have this idea of God that we can't know anything about God. God's outside of creation, right? I mean, God is, transcendent, beyond anything. His ways are not our ways. So end of story, close the book. There's nothing we can know about God, right? Let's just go to bed, hope for the best, because God and us don't share anything, all right? We're in creation. He's out of it. So you have this idea of a transcendent God, all right? Elohim, right? That created everything. Then you have this idea that, oh, you can pray to God, talk to God, please, shed your tears, and God will hear you. And not like, wait a minute, you can have this relationship with God, and this merciful, interactive aspect of God is usually connected with the name Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. All right, so hold on. We get 2 gods here. You have one that's outside of creation you can't connect to, and another within creation that you can have like a relationship somehow. What's going on? And the Zohar makes it a point to say, yeah, these are these 2 completely irreconcilable ideas about God. And it goes on to say, but the whole point of, I'll have to find it for you, but the whole point of existence, if you will, is to understand that those 2 are the same, that there's no difference. And of course, that doesn't work in our brains, but we just have to accept this somehow, that ein od milvado, there's no other power, there's nothing else but God, no matter what you try to think, that's just one. So the Zohar has this mysterious section that talks about that. So you have this idea of this everything God outside of creation, everything, which is that idea of the template of 10, right? And that includes Keter, and we can't understand everything is in that template of 10. And then you have the template of 7, which we deal with in creation, with this actual world, which is very significant to God, this actual world. So you have a 10 and a 7. What happens when you add 10 and a 7? You get 17. What is 17? You add 1 through 17, all the numbers, you get 153. There's your 17 showing up again. So Mashiach, now you go to the idea of Messiah, Mashiach, whose function, power, authority, etc., precedes the creation of the world. That's in the Talmud, Pesachim 54a. I have that one memorized. So all of these aspects in the concept Mashiach, they go back to Ein Sof. They go back to the God we can't understand, and the texts tell us, right? The books tell us, and it's like, but Mashiach is, significant to this world and comes in this world at the end of the age and brings in the kingdom and all. So Mashiach is the one that unites the 10 and the 7. So Mashiach is the 17. So Mashiach is the 153. So Mashiach is the fish on the ground. You see where this is all connecting? This is John's gospel. It has this kind of craziness in it, and this is a significant one. So there's a direct connection between the Parsha today and Moses and Betzalel and that business in the New Testament in John, based around 153, representing Mashiach, connecting all of pre-exists everything, just making this connection and bringing everything back to this perfect oneness. This ein od milvado. There's no other power. There's nothing else. No division of any type. No mountains, no valleys, as Isaiah says. It's just one thing that we're going to go back to one day. Anyhow, that's getting pretty deep. That's for another night. But that's Betzalel. So anyhow, that's Betzalel. And that's just the interesting thing here in the Talmud, Berachot 55 there. Moses got his instructions from God. And when he meets Betzalel, he says it backwards. Now, I don't know if that was intentional or what. But Betzalel, who had not allegedly heard, like Moses heard from God, corrects Moses and says, didn't you mean to say it the other way? And Moses says, wow, you must have been in the shadow of God because you know this. So I don't know if Moses was testing him or if Moses made a mistake. It's not clear, but whatever. Let's assume he was testing him. The kid passed the test. He says, Moses, it's not what God told you. How would he know what God told Moses? That's the interesting story here in the Talmudic reference there that you see, Berachot 55a. That's what that's about. So Bezalel is this interesting character who is so critical to putting the tabernacle, the Mishkan, together, which is the connecting piece, which is that connection between the Vav, which is a very messianic, Mashiach level of things connecting above and below, right? The sun and all of that, right? So we can explore that in more detail some other night. I'll keep moving on with this, but there's a lot of the whole middle realm of the ladder. In John's gospel, there's another one, right? John, I know this one. It's right in the first chapter. I think it's verse 51. He says, the Son of Man with the angels going up and down him. What is he talking about? Angels going up and down the Son of Man. That's Jacob's ladder. That's the middle world. That's the Vav. That's the six Sephirot in the middle, you see? So John's gospel's got all kinds of these crazy kabbalistic references throughout. But that's another one there with the angels going up and down the Son of Man. So he's equating Son of Man to the ladder in Jacob's dream, which is interesting. You start connecting these dots, and you start seeing some fascinating patterns. Sip of water here. Any comments or questions? No, we haven't got to the seven heavens yet, but they're coming up soon, Diana. Real soon. Because that's going to get wacky. All right, so let's go from Bezalel. I don't even remember what's on these slides anymore. I'm having fun. Okay, here we go. Additional views and concepts. This is where we're supposed to have like a commercial break. I'll do a commercial, okay? I already did it at the beginning. So we're going to have a lot of different chat rooms, Lord willing, throughout the year. We're not going to have any more long studies like we did. Direct Hashem ran from June to, now it's like 6-7 months, most of those nights, because that's hard for people to stay with. So we're going to have a lot of one-night things. We're going to have some movie nights. We're going to have some interactive discussions on dreams one night, on spiritual phenomena another night. I did put up a calendar, which is tentative, but pretty solid. On a side note, if you want to hear something really interesting, I think it's interesting. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do all of this stuff that I think I'm supposed to do. It's like, I feel like I'm supposed to do this stuff, but there's just no way. And then I had some medical issues, and I'm out on a medical leave of absence now for a number of weeks. So I got some physical medical things to deal with, but I have time now to do these things. So if you want to talk about God working in mysterious ways, there's number one. Number two, somebody contacted me in the goodness of their heart. I couldn't believe this. We had a laptop that was not working well, and I was using my work laptop, which was issues there, and somebody asked if they could give Elishev and I a laptop, and brand new laptop, and the guy bought us a laptop. And last week when I went out of work, my employer said, hand in your laptop, we want that while you're gone. So I had no laptop. So if that person had not given me this laptop a couple weeks ago, I wouldn't have a laptop. We wouldn't be doing this right now. So again, isn't that weird how Hashem works, right? What do they say? Puts the cure before the problem. Yeah, Baruch Hashem. I'm sitting here stunned, thinking how this is all played out. I'm like, I'm out of work now for quite a few weeks, and I am on a brand new laptop, and we're doing this room. And how did all that happen? I don't know. So keep us in prayer. The biggest thing for me is I get money to to get paid while I'm out. That's going to be an interesting discussion in terms of like short-term disability, because you know how insurance companies like to be. Anyhow, hopefully that all works out. Whatever, I'm doing this. So crazy. Yeah. So that's the commercial break here on this wonderful slide. Moving on. So we're going to do a lot of fun rooms. All right. So there's so many things we could talk about. I just picked some random ones just to kind of stimulate further conversation and give people some ideas about how many things there are to talk about. Would you take these 10 Sephirot? There's so many ways to look at them. You can actually, there's triads, when you three of them together, this interesting concept of triads. We saw a couple triads there, right? With Chagat and Nehi, Chesed, Gevurah Tiferet was a triad, and then Netzachod Yesod was a triad. And that's some interesting things when you have triads, because you have a right, a left, and a balance in the middle. So that's a cool concept. But then you also have pairs, okay? And they pair up in an interesting way, because they not only pair up like, left to right, some of them, but there's other pairs here. And I spelt Malkut poorly. I should have put an H in there. So it's Malkut. All right. So they pair up like this, okay? So if you stop and think of a person, let's use a person, right? You are currently sitting down in a chair in your home, probably. Let's just assume, okay? If you were to take the idea of a map, and you have what, longitude and latitude, right? So how far are you east, west, north, south? So you can pinpoint your location, physical location, to a degree with longitude, latitude, east, west, north, south. Now, are you on the floor? Are you 10 feet up in the air? Are you in an airplane? So there's also the idea of up and down. So to get a true, and this is like when you shake the lulav in Sukkot, right? You go east, west, north, south, up, down, right? In the sukkah, same idea. So if the physical location of a person is determined by these three pairs of coordinates. You with me so far? So that's space. Now, are we talking about you now? Are we talking about you yesterday, a week ago, or maybe tomorrow? So you have the time element. You have another dimension there. So you have the three dimensions of space, and you have a dimension of time, past, present, and future. All right? Still with me? Lastly, what are you doing? Are you doing something holy right now? Are you in a Torah study online? Yeah, good. Because if you were doing something bad, let's say you were robbing a bank, that would be a whole other dimension there. So you can pinpoint a human being in 5 ways. The 3 ways of physical space, time, when it's happening or when they're at, and then what they're doing. Is it something that is considered good or bad at the time? So that's how you can pinpoint a human being, their reality, if you will, at any moment. You get that? And this aligns with the 10 Sephirot in that they're paired up. So you have Keter at the very top, which is quote unquote closest to God. Again, it's not close like we're measuring miles or meters, but Keter being closer to that side of things, and Malkut, kingdom, down here, like on earth, further away from God, and they are represented at the top and the bottom on the tree. So Malkut's not bad. Don't think that Malkut's bad, but just in terms of the idea of closer to God, further away, or good versus less good, good to evil, that's one pairing, okay? Then, as I mentioned earlier, Chokhmah, Binah. Chokhmah is very singular. You only have one past, right? Look back, what happened to you yesterday? What'd you have for dinner? You had, I don't know, chicken sandwich, okay? You can't change that. You had a chicken sandwich yesterday. What are you going to have for dinner tomorrow? I don't know. You get all kinds of possibilities. That's the future. So the future is Binah, has many choices, many possibilities, as we talked about. That's the feminine side. And the masculine side, the past, is very singular, which is Chokhmah. So Chokhmah is past, Binah is future. And then you have the other 3 pairs, okay, which represent the where you shake the lulav and at Sukkot when you do that, the spatial dimensions. And they are Netzach and Hod, which are the Moses and Aaron, if you connect back to the names, the patriarchs, which are your up and down thing, which is pretty interesting if you stop and think of some of the dialogue they had. Then you have Tiferet and Yesod, which are actually both on the middle pillar, and that's considered east-west. And like if you think like the temple, there's a relationship of above and below there too, because you think of the eastern gate of the temple in the future, everything's going to come through the eastern gate of the future temple and all this down this direction. So Jacob is at Tiferet with the patriarchs, east, more toward God, and Joseph is more relating to the people to this direction, west at Yesod. All right. And then the last one, Gevurah Chesed, north-south. If you notice, there's a lot of references in the Tanakh of evil coming from the north. You'll find a whole bunch, Ezekiel and others, evil sends to, or something on the north side of the altar. North is always got some kind of weird trepidation to it. And that's because north relates to Gevurah, or judgment, and south toward Chesed. So you can pair these off. Sometimes that's a clue too. When you're reading things in the Tanakh, there may be a deeper aspect of what you're reading. So when you read something coming from the north, you're thinking, oh, it's coming from, you know, Antarctica or Canada or Russia or something. And it's like, well, it might not exactly mean that. It might be a deeper level saying it's coming from the side of evil. You see what I'm saying? That's when you start reading the Torah a little differently, when you see that there's a coded language like this in places. Of course, north can still mean north, right? And sure, it absolutely could. But it could also be either also or in place of a different aspect to it. That's why you need to study the sages and oral Torah and these things to learn what these things have been taught from Moses on down. All right, so that's a pretty cool little thing here, pairing. So you had triads earlier. Well, you had the different structures and substructures, right? You had the left, center, right. You had the triads of Nehi and Chagat there, and then now you got pairings with these different dimensions. So you can see there's a lot of things that branch out from just the basic idea of the tree and the 10 and the 10. We're already at a multiple bunch of concepts here already. Let's see what the next slide holds. Drum roll. Okay, so this is an interesting thing. I like this little PowerPoint thing because I cheated. I use this little PowerPoint assistant thing that helps you make cooler looking graphics. And I guess it picks up on certain words you type. I've never done it before, so this is all new for me. Some of you are probably great at this. So I think the word house is in here. Yeah, in Proverbs. And it put a picture of a house. I'm like, oh, how cool is that? That's perfect. So the seven lower Sephirot, the Midot as they're called, those seven, are found in First Chronicles. Actually, they're actually listed in here. Again, these things, and I've got another slide coming up that shows you how many different like words and terms are associated with these things. But here you have the whole idea of the greatness. It begins with chesed, and these are terms. Sometimes these terms could relate to more than one of the Sephirot. So you might say, well, isn't like mercy, for example, isn't mercy chesed? Some people put mercy at Tiferet, and they call chesed loving kindness, and they consider mercy to be the balance between loving kindness and judgment. It's all just language. It's more important to understand the concept, you know, because Tiferet is also compassion, rachamim, which is the balance. So some texts will use mercy with chesed. Sometimes they'll use mercy with tiferet. It's no big deal, just as long as you know what they're talking about. So here you have greatness associated with chesed, power, which is always geburah. Glory here is associated with tiferet. And then you have victory and majesty, which are netzah and hod, literally. And then an interesting one here is, there it is. See this little word here called all? I don't know if you can see it highlighted, A-L-L. ALL is a nickname code word, or the fancy English term is a cognomen for Yesod. And the reason, I'll tell you why this is really cool. Let me finish this. So you got all, which represents Yesod, and then kingdom, Malkut. So all seven are in Chronicles, okay? Again, this is standard Jewish teaching. I'm not making any of this up. What's interesting is Proverbs 9:1 is also associated here. It only takes it a little higher up. You have Chokhmah, wisdom, has built her house. Now you might say, well, wisdom's building her own house. No, wisdom here is building someone else's house. Wisdom is the builder building her house. Her house is Binah, the mom. Dad's building mom the house here. Get it? Wisdom is building Binah's house. She, Binah, has carved out her seven pillars. Well, you already know what those seven are. Those are the seven Sephirot below Binah, right? Chokhmah, Binah, then the seven below. So the Proverbs 9:1 is pointing toward First Chronicles 29:11 in that respect. They're talking about the same thing here. They're talking about the structure, and they're talking about the seven pillars, the seven Sephirot below. So a couple things here. Well, while I'm thinking of it, Proverbs 9:1. So some people will say, wait a minute, isn't wisdom feminine? Because if you look in Proverbs, it refers to wisdom as the she, feminine a lot. And the reason it does that is Proverbs is, in that section of Proverbs, is talking about everything being in perfect alignment, like the name of God was one. It's referring to like an aspect or time, like in Zechariah says, in that day his name will be one, because it's not right now. Things are a mess, but in that day it'll be all connected as one again. Proverbs is referring to, I guess you could say, like a time or situation where everything was in this perfect oneness. And the teaching here is when everything is in perfect oneness, Abba, Chokhmah, is then perfectly connected all the way down to Malkut, which is the daughter. So the father is connected all the way down to the daughter in perfection. There's nothing, no interruption, no breaks, nothing, okay? And she is then called by her father's name, or her father's authority, or her father's power, which is masculine, which is Chokhmah, wisdom. So she, Malkut, or the Shekhinah, the divine presence, she, the bride, the daughter, it's all the same. She is now called Chokhmah because she's connected to her father. She's called by his name. So that's where you get the idea in Proverbs of Chokhmah being considered in a feminine sense. All of these things can be considered masculine or feminine depending on what's being talked about. But generally speaking, in kabbalistic language, Chokhmah is on the right and masculine because it's on the side of force, of, starting something up. Men wake up and get a bright idea. Hey, let's go to the beach. All right. And what was the other thing I was going to mention? Oh, I'm spacing out here. Oh, all, A-L-L. Okay. So here's one for you. Now picture yourself on the tree and you're starting from the bottom up. Okay. Some of you might recognize this sentence. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all will be added to you. So if you go back to, let's just scroll back. I hope I don't lose my connection here because my cat is just about sitting on my keyboard and he needs to move. Okay, let me go back here. Oh, this is painfully slow. It's going to be a faster way to do this. Apparently not. I have to scroll. Okay, let me go back till I see one of these diagrams that we left. Here we go. This will work right here. Okay, so Malkut down here is kingdom, right? So we're kind of around here doing nothing, and that verse says, "Seek ye first the kingdom," because Malkut, this level is called the first gate, G-A-T-E. The first gate is Malkut. It's associated with things like humility. Okay, so seek ye first the kingdom, Malkut, and then what's going to be added to you? What's above? All, because this, as I pointed to you on that other diagram, everything goes through Yesod here. Everything, all comes through Yesod. So when you make this connection here, we'll talk about this more in a minute. When you make that connection, you seek the kingdom here first, and you make the connection to Yesod, which is all else, meaning literally all else will then be added to you. You ain't getting all until you go through the kingdom and then Yesod. So Yesod is called all for that reason. So it's again more coded language. You'll find a ton of this in a book called Gates of Light, Share Ora. It's kind of expensive. It's like $50-$60 if you're lucky. Probably got it a long time ago, cheaper. But it's called Gates of Light, written in the 13th century. Believe it or not, it's been brought down in the English. Oops, went too far. It's been brought down in the English. The original author's name was a Rabbi Joseph Gikatia. His Spanish accent there, Gikatia. And he talks a lot about this code, these different terms. The whole book's about the names of God and these 10 Sephirot and all of that. So slightly more advanced text, but, someday talk to me and I can help you find it cheap. Okay. So this is cool. Now, this page I'm not going to spend more than a second on. This is just, I listed the 10 terms, the 10 Sephirot. And over the years, I've accumulated a lot of words and nicknames associated with them. So that's what this slide is, okay? And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. It starts at Keter up here. The literal meaning is the first thing or closest to literal meaning. It's also known as these other things in the Bible. So then you go to Chokhmah, Binah, and so on down, okay? So I'm just going to blow through this one because obviously that's a lot of text. So we're getting closer and closer to Diane's seven heavens. We're almost there. So we're going to look just at a couple things here. There's only a few more slides. So as I mentioned earlier, there's these 4 worlds or 4 levels, and the one before creation, which is existence, but before creation, so it's still called existence. And it's that world associated with the name Elohim that created. So it's a world that's closer to God or nearness. Atzilut, it means Atzilut. The word Atzilut means nearness, like near to God, because it's the closer of the worlds to God. Okay, so in this world, it's called the world of emanation. This is really the first level where things are seen as being kind of separate from God, if you will, from our perspective. And this is where the whole idea of these Sephirot or these emanations first expresses itself. Okay, before that, everything's very singular, very unified, hidden away within God, and we can't really think of it. But here's our first way that we can relate to God through the Sephirot. They kind of, if you will, appear. They're everywhere, but they appear, if you will, at this level in terms of, here's these things that we can relate to that are in existence. They're outside of creation, but we can understand them a bit because they're still within existence. Okay, so that's what this means. And one of the things that emanates at this level, the idea of names of God, and there's different, as I said, this isn't fixed in cement. There's different names of God that can be, depending on what's going on. But generally, this is a general scheme. It's one general scheme. You might find a different one in other books. But when you see one term very rare in the Bible is when the first time Moses says, "Hey, who are you?" And God says, "Ehyeh asher ehyeh, I am that I am," right? And Ehyeh is associated with something like Moses doesn't even get it because it's out of bounds. That's Keter. It's at the top there. Ehyeh. Okay. And then you got these other names. You have Elohim on the left because that's more associated with judgment. Yod-Heh Vav-Heh on the right here, more associated with mercy. Oops, hold on. I'm going to minimize the screen. El and Yah are two other names. El, which is a shorter version of Eloah, Elohim, all those words that stem from that. Yah, which is a Yod-Heh, which is part of this word. You'll see that sometimes in the Torah. Then you see this interesting combined name here, Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh, Elohim together. You know where you see that? In the creation story, Genesis 1, if you go look, Genesis 1, you see Elohim throughout the whole thing. Elohim, 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 okay? And then when you get into the Garden of Eden story, that whole around section 2, give or take, chapter 2, give or take, it's not just Elohim anymore. It's the combined name, Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh, Elohim. That combined name is all through the Garden of Eden story because it's like a middle realm. It's kind of a transition or middle realm. And then when they get booted out, Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh becomes the primary name throughout the rest of the Tanakh. So you go from Elohim in Genesis, let's put it this way, Elohim before the Garden of Eden, Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh, Elohim combined in the Garden of Eden, and then Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh after the I'm trying to shrink down this silly chat window here. Oh well. After the Garden of Eden. There we go, shrunk it down. Okay. So that middle one, Sephirot, is often associated with the combined name. It's also associated with Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh by itself a lot too in a lot of texts, by the way. And then you have on the right and left there, Elohim Tzevaot and Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh Tzevaot. Tzevaot is like the armies of God. It's like God is acting, but he's acting through his angelic forces. So sometimes they're from the right side, which is the proactive, more merciful side, and sometimes they're from the stricter, judgmental side. So you'll see this term, Elohim Tzevaot and Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh Tzevaot, together, different places in the Tanakh. Okay, that's pretty cool. And then, of course, we mentioned earlier this one here, where everything passes through Yesod to get down to the bottom one. El Shaddai, which is provision, so the provision comes through. And El Chai is like God of life, or the living God, if you will. You'll see that term used in Tanakh. You'll see in the New Testament too. The living God is associated with here, which has to do with the fact that you're making a connection to the greater reality of spirituality, and that's really what life's about. So when the Torah says, follow these commandments, choose life, it's like you're choosing life. You're not going to like quote unquote, like earn your salvation kind of thing, but you're choosing to make the spiritual connection that the Torah guides you toward, and that's why he says choose life. He's saying choose the path, choose to seek first the kingdom, and then all or life will be added to you. So, okay. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, why is Elohim on the left, El on the right? I'll have to do some research. Again, this is one scheme I pulled up, but generally Elohim sometimes is often down here too, where you see Adonai when things aren't going right in the divine presence. What was those commercials? It's not nice to fool Mother Nature. Remember that? It was not nice to mess with the Shekhinah, the divine presence, by doing bad things in the world. Elohim is often, because it's associated with judgment, when the daughter or the bride is angry, she becomes like, she takes on the characteristics of Elohim. So these things shift around. El is generally not associated so much with judgment. It's not that common a name either. But if you look in the Tanakh, when El is used, it's not really used in the context of judgment or restriction, whereas Elohim is. Even the very first verse of the Bible, right? Elohim created the heavens and the earth goes back to the general idea that there was God, nothing but God at one point, if you can even say that, right? Let's use simple language. So before anything was created in any way, shape, or form, or whatever, there was just God. Well, how does anything get created if there's just God? It doesn't make sense. It's almost like God has to make room for something that's not God. And this is a whole kabbalistic concept called Tzimtzum, where God actually restricted of himself, so to speak. These are not literal terms, in order for something else or things, creation, to exist. And that whole idea of restriction is the left side. Restriction is another term as opposed to something being, what's the opposite of restriction? Proactive? I don't know. Construction? I don't know. The right side is some adding something, and the left side is taking away. So the whole idea of Elohim in the first verse of the Bible reflects on the idea of the side of restriction, where God, again, this is very, what's the word, metaphorical language. God had to restrict of God, so to speak, in order for something to exist that wasn't God, which is creation, all creation. So there's a deep concept called tzimtzum, which is restriction. Okay, I'm going to move on. And then Adonai is a name that we use a lot. Adon, Lord, when we're referring to God, God in our reality here, in our day-to-day physical existence. At a deeper level, it's Shekhinah, the divine presence. At another level, it's Ruach HaKodesh, Holy Spirit. These are all interchangeable terms. But Adonai is like a common God name, if you will, for our day-to-day reference and how we relate to God, more or less, right here at this level that we're in. Sorry, I'm going to get hitting the water bottle hard here. All right, so this is just one of the things that exist in terms of the 10 Sephirot at the level of Atzilut is the Sephirot themselves, but like names of God. This is where this kind of emanates from. There's other things too that emanate in the world of emanation that come about in Atzilut. But I'm just looking at one thing here. So names of God and how we, consider that something beyond creation, right? Before creation. That's the level of Atzilut. Now we're getting near Diane's favorite slide here, or will be her favorite slide, I think. Hold on. The next level down, or the next world down from Atzilut is called Berea, which is creation. It literally means creation. Now, all three of those worlds I talked about are all part of creation. So you have the highest level of creation, which is like the throne room of God, and which is called creation, Berea. And then within that, there's a lower level of the angels, Jacob's ladder, which is called Yetzirah, or formation. And then below that, if you can use that word, is our world, of physical world with our bodies and planets and animals and stars and anything you can see, touch, smell, down here. So those are three worlds within creation, but the top level is actually called creation, which is Berea. Okay. And again, this goes back to Genesis 1. It starts with Atzilut, where it says Elohim, in the beginning Elohim created. So that's before creation. Then it starts created heavens and earth. Now you're talking about Berea in Genesis 1:1. So it's the highest of the three worlds of creation. Throne room of God, those kind of things. Okay, so in there's three different ways to describe some of the, if you will, entities at this level. In the book of Revelation, by the way, when you see the throne or the thrones, the throne of God, throne of the Lamb, all that's talking at this level. And the heavenlies opened up, it's talking this level. When you see, if you took the Derek Hashem study, or if you've read Derek Hashem, he uses the term forces, right? This is overarching, powers of control over all of things that come afterwards. Paul in the New Testament calls it powers. So powers in the New Testament is equivalent to forces in Derek Hashem. The world below this with the angels that control, the angels have more precise control over everything in our physical world. That's what Paul calls principalities. So principalities would be the Yetzirah, and powers would be Berea up here. And then in the most Christian texts would call them archangels. So an arch is like overarching or overseeing. It's not really an angel. It's more of a greater angel, like it's kind of in control of many regular angels. So in a lot of Christian literature, you'll see archangels, which is equivalent term. So forces, powers, archangels are all the equivalent idea of something at the highest level of the spiritual worlds in creation that kind of oversee things, if you will. So hang on loosely again to that idea. And these archangels actually have names in Jewish traditions too. So it's not just a Christian thing. It's just that Christianity uses the term archangel a lot more than you'll see in Judaism. Okay. Are you ready? Here we go. Now, again, each one of these worlds has different things we can talk about. I'm not saying the next slide is this is what this world is, but as I said, there's different things. We already see some things here in Berea that we're talking about. But there's also a specific aspect that's interesting in the world of Berea. Berea is also called the world of the heavenlies, or the heavens. This is not to be confused with when you look up in the sky and see the clouds and planets. That's still the physical world. That's still the lowest world. Heavens here is a completely spiritual concept, and generally speaking, it's always plural in the Shamayim. It's almost always plural anywhere you see. And the teaching in Judaism is that there's a heavenly realm, but within the heavenly realm, it's carved up into your favorite number 7 again. All the worlds have some relationship to 7. And within the heavenly realm of 7, there's what's called 7 heavens. And they're given names, and they're given, these are approximate locations. Let's not be too specific here. I kind of mapped this out, okay? So, and there's different ways you can understand what these are. I put in different spiritual levels or spiritual conditions, okay? Because they mean different things. So again, keeping in mind the overarching principle that Berea is the overarching world. This is above the angels. This is things that kind of overseeing concepts and powers and forces, right? Got to keep that in mind. This is very, ivory tower, big high level executive stuff, There's these seven levels of heaven. And these, the way they're listed here is top to bottom here. Okay. And, so if we're looking at the Sephirot here, they're mapped out actually across all 10, if you will. It's kind of a long, complicated, convoluted answer here, but there's a reference. I don't have Psalm 68:4. I don't know if somebody can copy and paste that into our little chat box here, so I can stay on this. But Psalm 68:4 mentions a heaven of heavens, something equivalent to that. And this is the highest level, our boat. Okay. And it's considered like, because it's considered like the highest where everything is. It's like the storehouse. It's kind of connected very much to Keter, where everything is hidden away and stored away back there. Interesting concept associated with it is it has something to do with resurrection too, which is interesting. Like what will resurrect our bodies and all is like hidden away, stored away even before existence, because the fact of our very lives and everything goes back that far. So does the concept of resurrection as well. So I'm going to save. I've saved this presentation, of course, so you can look at this more in detail later. I don't want to go spend too much time on these. A couple interesting things though. The second one, Makom, which is kind of up in that region of the top of the 3 of the mind of God, and then what emanates out of that, like kind of like almost like right below those 3. There's a thing called the bat kol. The bat kol really means daughter's voice, or daughter of the voice. And when you hear an audible, if you look in the Bible, and there's like a voice from the heavens, that's the bat kol, the daughter's voice, or the voice of the daughter. It's a feminine voice that speaks. So this throws a real wrinkle on your New Testament, where there's a voice from the heavens that says, oh, this is my son, of whom I can't remember the whole verse, but you know what the one I'm talking about, right? That's mom. It's not dad. I'm being facetious. That's the feminine voice. That's the bat kol saying out loud that they hear. I'm not saying it sounds like a woman's voice, but I'm saying it's called the daughter, the voice of the daughter's voice, bat kol. So that's all right. Thanks, Soteria, for posting that. So that's just interesting. The bat kol in one tradition, I mean, it may be more than one tradition, but one tradition I've read that the bat kol emanates from up there at that second level. And so on. Now, what's real interesting here, because these are numbered in reverse order from the top down. So if you flip them around, right? The number 5 one, Shechakim, really, I've kind of hidden this from everyone. If you were to go from the bottom up, Shechakim is the third heaven. Now, there's another New Testament verse here. Again, these verses it's interesting. There's things in the New Testament that are found more in like Zohar, Midrash, Talmud, and not so much in the Tanakh. It's really interesting. So the idea of the third heaven, Paul says something happened to him and he was taken up to the third heaven. And as we know, Paul has this experience he's relating to where he went from being a not so nice guy to all of a sudden having this mission in life and what he's supposed to now do, right? We know the whole story. And he talks about going to the third heaven. Well, look at Shechakim. Remember, they're numbered wrong. It says 5 here from the top down, but it's really number 3 from the bottom up. Shechakim is considered the third heaven. I need to fix this slide. Shechakim, where an incarnate human rises during prayer and is instructed in the mysteries of creation. What does Paul say about his trip to the third heaven? He says he saw things he can't even talk about. He can't even relate. He's describing Shechakim. So Paul's description of the third heaven in whatever book that is absolutely 100% consistent with the Jewish idea of Shechakim, the third heaven. He's shown things about the big plan, if you will, that he can't even, it's overwhelming. He can't even put into words hardly. But you see it put into words in a lot of his texts, have a lot of hidden stuff in his letters as well that relate to these things. And so I'll keep, like I said, I'm going to save this. So, this is stuff you can research these terms on the internet and find more about them. But that's generally, and again, the locations are very approximate, but across this idea of the world of Berea, there's this idea of a hierarchy of heavens and having certain functions. It's very functional in the world of Berea. It's kind of like I said, it's forces and powers of how things work. Whereas the angels below are kind of like the guys that go back and forth and make it happen between heaven and earth. I got a little whiny dog next to me here. So let's see where we're at here. Yeah, I'm going to give you a snack in a minute. Here's a cool slide. Again, a couple last slides here just to illustrate some interesting points. This is actually on a book cover. A couple of places. Actually, this book cover to Gates of Light, or at least the old cover. I think they changed it. Says this guy holding on to the tree of life diagram. And just a little point here. First, you see the top 3 are very small because they're hidden away. Those are actually the Mochim, Keter and Chochmah and Binah, right? Those 3 hidden away. So then the lower 7 are bigger. But what's interesting is it's not by coincidence where he's holding this thing. He's holding it in the path between the bottom 2, between Malkut at the very bottom. You see the Mem, Lamed, you're reading that from right to left. And above it is Yesod, starts with the Yod there, and then Samech, right? Okay, so he's holding it there. That connection, as I mentioned earlier, remember, we're down at Malkut. If that connection where his hand is broken, we're cut off from all spirituality above. So there's a significant thing there. And that connection, that middle path he's holding is called the path of the Zadik. That's the path. It's the middle path. Now it continues up and up, but the key point here is you're connecting the bottom to above. You're connecting the bottom, which is the bride, to the next group above, because Yesod kind of is the entry point, and that's the masculine, that's the groom. So connecting the groom to the bride. So when you connect the groom to the bride internally within your own life or with other people or the world, you're strengthening that bond and uniting the physical and the spiritual, and things are good. When you do things, or humanity does things that disconnect the bride from the groom through sin and terrible things, you're disconnecting the two. You cause the groom and the bride to be separate. You cause that break where his hand is becomes a disconnecting point. So that's called the path of the Zadik. So the righteous person, the Zadik, is at Yesod. Then there's Zedek at the bottom and Zedaka. They're related terms in the middle. So when you do good things, you make that connection. Simple concept, but it's called the path of the Zadik. And so when there's a disconnect, when the top part is disconnected and flies off, bad stuff happens down here, which is interesting. It's another weird verse of the New Testament that talks about something being removed right? It's in Thessalonians, something's going to be removed and all bad stuff happens afterwards, right? The man of sin is revealed and all that. And people try to figure out what that means. It's basically expressing the idea of that there's going to be so much unrighteousness in the world that connection is going to be somewhat severed. And when the bride is severed from the groom and all, it's the old, joke I made earlier about, don't fool with Mother Nature, those commercials, you get all upset, I don't know if you're old enough to remember those, but anyhow, the bride, or Shekhinah, gets angry that she's separated from the groom. That's the language used in the kabbalistic writing. She gets upset, and the result of the Shekhinah getting upset over that disconnect, believe it or not, if you look in Gates of Light, it's you're gonna love this. It's death, famine, war, and pestilence. Where else do we read about those four things? Yeah, in the book of Revelation. It's exactly the same thing. Those things all start to happen to the planet when there's that disconnect on the path of the Tzaddik. So we do good stuff. We maintain that connection to all, ALL, right? All above, all spirituality. And when we don't do good stuff, all humanity, etc., the Jewish people especially, when we sever that connection, we're down here with the bride and she's angry, and nature and all these other things are going to go awry, go crazy. So that's an important, simple, but really important key concept, is the path of the Tzaddik. I think I have one or two more slides here. I'm not sure. Okay. The other idea of and I'm going to spend 1 second on this. This is a weird diagram you might see. I don't even know why I put it in here, but the idea of when the Sephirot came into play in that highest world, when we see the 10 Sephirot on that tree we looked at, the tree of life. The other idea is they came in like an order, like this ray of light penetrated in, and the Sephirot came in like one after the other. So you have, it's really kind of hard to read the Hebrew here, but it's Keter, Chochmah, Binah. No, wait a minute, hold on. Boy, it's really hard for me to read. Yeah, okay, so this is Malkut, Yesod, Hod, Netzah. I'm going up now. Tiferet. So that would be Gevurah, Chesed, and then Bina, Chochmah, Keter. There we go. So the ray of light coming from outside, from God, starts with Keter, right, closest to God, and goes deeper and deeper and deeper until finally it's in this darkest area here, which is us down here in the darkness, trying to find our way back to God. And this is another way of understanding the development of things, how things came into creation, came into play at the level of the Sephirot, that they themselves kind of came in like almost like one after another. So it's not always the tree diagram that you see. Sometimes you see them in a certain other expressions. The tree diagram is the most common one because you can learn all these principles from it, but the concentric circles is another way too. I think that's the last slide. No, wait, there's more. Oh, the menorah. Here's another cute one. The menorah itself is a hidden reference to the 10 Sephirot. This is found in a number of places, and I'm going to have to let my doggy out here in a minute. So again, I apologize for some of the spelling. Now, this one's not too bad, but the candles across the top, if you go right toward the middle, green, purple, blue, so you go in, that's the right side, Netzah, then Hesed, and then Chochmah are the right side ones. Then if you go in the middle, is Keter, the highest one, of course. Then on the left are the left side ones of Bina, Gevurah, Hod. And then you go down the middle under Keter. Remember, the manifestation of Keter in the physical world is Da'at. And I do have to let my dog out, or he's gonna have an accident. All right, so I'll let you look at this diagram. I'll be right back. No? Really? You're just trolling for snacks. Yeah, false alarm. He's just trolling for snacks. Yeah, you'll get a snack in a minute, honey. All right. So anyhow, Malkut's at the bottom, and you're going up the middle here, right? The middle, Malkut at the bottom, Yesod above in the gray, Tiferet in the orange, Da'at, and then at the top. So there's 11 here because it does show Da'at. It shows Da'at and Keter, which is not that common because you're usually thinking one way or the other, top down or bottom up. But there are studies and certain things you can study where you do kind of talk about the two at the same time, and the menorah represents that. So the menorah is a cool representation. And remember what was said about do you remember what was said about the menorah, how it was created, the instructions given regarding the menorah. is pretty interesting. It's not a lot of, there weren't a lot of screws and nails used, put it that way. If you remember, I'm testing your Bible trivia here. If you don't remember, go look it up. It's a very unified piece, and which is remarkable. And it gives you the idea here again that although we're looking at these 10 Sephirot, there aren't 10 gods, there aren't 10 parts to God. There's no such thing. In fact, some of the early days of kabbalistic teachings, there was a lot of criticism even within Judaism that said, hey, the Christians turn God into 3, you Kabbalists are turning God into 10, and it's like a lack of understanding. These are just emanations, ways we relate to and understand God, because this is how our brains work in this physical world. God is one unity. One day when we're with God in the Olam Haba, it'll be a completely different thing. There won't be any of this stuff, any kind of division or connections or anything. That's when Torah is on the heart, because there's no more choice, there's no more free will, there's no more sin, there's no more consequence. Torah will be on your heart in the Olam Haba, because it's just going to be all oneness. All right. So let's see. I think that's the last slide, kids. Yes. Questions? Look at that. So I'm going to do more of these. I'm trying to do like one, I don't know what you want to call it, one level at a time. So last week we did some stuff on the 4 worlds. This one's a little more focused on the Ten Sephirot. We can go further and further with this stuff, and I would like to. I want to save these kind of discussions for when we don't have specific themes for the evening, because I'm trying to do some more specific interactive things where I'm not just talking at people, because that's, of some interest to some people. Whereas if we have a very interactive room on a hot topic, we'll get a lot more people and a lot more excitement, right? So I'm looking to generate a lot more interaction with people so more people can benefit from these things, So yeah, when we have like the room on dreams, that's going to be hot stuff. When we have the room on spiritual phenomena, that's going to be crazy. When we have... I'll make sure I still have my mic on here, right? Y'all still hear me? Just doing a mic check here. Do you still hear me? Yes, good. So yeah, I want to do more interactive stuff on fun topics where people have a lot to say and share. It's not like teaching stuff per se, like this, but really get into it more, psychological things, relationship things. Of course, we're going to have some hot movie nights. We are going to have the Matrix movies coming up, which are going to be fun because we'll break those up into sections. If you're not familiar, we did Ushpizin, and we'll do Ushpizin again too this spring and in the fall again. We'll do one night this spring during the Omer count. But 3 Matrix movie nights in the March. And the reason I'm doing this, the timing is great, because 20 years ago, this March, the first Matrix movie came up. So if you didn't feel old, you do now. 1999, March of 99, on Erev Pesach, on Passover night, they released, not a coincidence either, they released the first Matrix movie. So in honor of that, we're going to do 3 movie nights during March. I think I put some dates up already, and one in there somewhere we're going to pause to do Purim, because we don't want to overlook that. I think Purim's the 3rd week. So we're going to do a Matrix movie, Purim's the 2nd one. And then third, the next 2 weeks will be Matrix again. So we're going to have some fun with those. And what we do is, because they're rather long movies, like Ushpizin. Well, Ushpizin was an hour and a half. These might be a little longer. We're going to break it up into maybe 5 or 6 sections to find good places in the movie to stop. And we'll have 5-10 minutes in between and talk about, hey, what did we just see? And then maybe talk about what we will see. Okay, there's a good little discussion, what we saw. And now in the next section, look for this, and then we'll see it and we'll talk about it. We'll go back and forth like that. So it'll be some fun discussion. We've done this with Ushpizin for several years now. And hold on. We've done it with Ushpizin for several years now, so it's becoming, I think that works pretty well, for those of you that are in those rooms. And it'll be a lot of interrelationship here, because we're talking about similar concepts, only in a different format. If you're not familiar with the Matrix movies and you're wondering why would he do that, the Matrix movies have more Torah concepts in them than any movie anywhere on the planet, ever, period. And I'm talking about religious movies. You pick anything, even Ushpizin. There's more in the Matrix movies it's insane. How it happened is a whole other story, a whole other mystery. God works in mysterious ways because these are not religious people. They're kind of weird, the people who put it all together, but still, it's absolutely mind-blowing. And I know I'm not crazy. Well, not entirely, and I thought I was a couple of years ago when I stumbled on two rabbis discussing the Matrix movies, and they have 10 videos. And it's that we're going to share that stuff too at some point, because they get into it, like concepts like I can't believe. And I'm like, oh, either we're all crazy now or I'm not. So I'm going to go with I'm not. Or crazy like Morpheus. But I have a confused dog here. I don't think he knows why I'm up. He keeps looking at me. And so those are going to be fun. And the Omer count, we're going to take it another level this year too. Much more crazy interactive stuff for the Omer count. We're going to use one of the weeks to kick off another project. We've been talking about having a prayer intention group. And this is not just a group where we pray for this. No, this is going to take things to a whole other crazy level. This is going to take things into Atzilut. We're going to experiment. It's going to be a very experimental group in a kosher way. And it's probably not going to be for everybody. But we're looking to take the idea of prayer, of meditation, of communal prayer, whatever you want to call it, and see what can happen. Let's just put it that way. And that's going to be... that could be nuts. That could be the cat's meow. I'm telling you there are groups out there that do stuff. I forget this woman. She's been doing stuff for years. Elisheva talked about her. She's been bringing people together to have good intentions for each other. They meet, they talk, they go off in different directions. They might be in different parts of the country. And she's been doing these scientific outside of a Torah framework, just good intentions. And it's weird that she's been having these fantastic results for people where you're praying for someone else, but something in your life is happening. And I'm not talking about any kind of magic or voodoo or craziness here. I'm just saying she's had these scientific results that they're doing positive thoughts for each other and something nice is happening. Okay, let's just assume God's okay with that because we're being nice to each other. Well, how much more so then where Hashem in the Torah and the Tanakh and the Talmud and the New Testament everywhere says we need to be praying for each other, implying that could have results, of sorts. So this is the whole theme behind this. Only crazy people will be allowed into this group, by the way. So fill out your applications now. Seriously, it's going to take some unique people to really, really want to dive into this because this is going to take a commitment. And it's not about just people getting what they want. It's just kind of like studying this whole idea of why does all the literature say we should be praying together? What's going on there, And part of that, and then you have just the general idea of a minyan, right? Of 10 people praying together, you got to have 10. What's 10 obviously means something, right? As we learned tonight, we talked about tonight. 10 is significant. Not that we need 10, but I'm just saying, the idea of these individuals coming together in many subgroups. I mean, there's all of humanity, and then you break it down. We have these groups right here on Facebook. We have a group tonight, and lots of other groups. The idea of people coming together, these souls uniting, there's some kind of, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, power, strength, or ability that goes beyond just one person praying. It's in the Tanakh. It's everywhere. So what does it mean? So the whole idea behind this group is to really explore these ideas and also try some interesting things to see what happens. But, like anything else, it comes down to yesod. If people got to be living right, people got to be thinking right. We got to have the right kavanah, the right intention. This isn't a thing about, oh boy, I'm going to get a big fat tax refund if I join this group. No, nothing like that. No expectations other than to always just to get closer to God somehow. So, but still, it's going to be it's going to be a group that's on the right side. When we study these technical things, it's on the left side. You know what I'm saying? This is like technical specific stuff. Right side stuff would be when we have open discussions and experiment with things like that. That's on the creative right side. So we're doing a little Kabbalah there in terms of what these different projects are about. Some are more technical learning and connections, and others are more expansive. And let's see what's out there in this vast spiritual wilderness God has provided for us. So yes, crazy people should apply soon. More on that later. So that's going to be one of the weeks, because last year, if you recall, if you were with me, the third week we talked about the Anabacoa prayer. We are going to look at that again even deeper. It's a fascinating piece of work. Talk about combining the 7 and the 6, like we talked about earlier. That's what that prayer is all about. But we're going to talk more about prayer in general that week, and also more about this prayer intention group. Will kind of come out of that third week of the Omer count. So we're going to do some different things each week. Each week's going to be very unique, very different. Might launch a new project. It's just I want to push this further than last year, which was further than the year before. So hopefully we'll get some more. Hold on a second. Oh, there you go. My dog is acting like something out of one of those cheap horror movies. All of a sudden he disappears, and I look around, where are you? And he's like behind me staring at me. I'm like, cut that out. You're freaking me out. So any thoughts on anything tonight or any of these other ideas, please just engage more. We need to stay engaged because, one of the things that happens, as you know, is when things either get too good or too bad, people forget about Torah study and prayer and these things, get too mixed up with life, And there's a particular number of places where you read about, there'll come a day when, the world's going to get very dark and evil, and it'll be a struggle even for spiritual people to keep it going. And Torah study is going to kind of like get, on the back burner and fade away, and all this stuff, it doesn't mean it has to happen. Doesn't mean it has to happen to you, me, or anybody else. So the more you exercise, the more you stay in shape, right? So the more we do these spiritual things, these projects, these studies, these groups, whatever, it's just good for us to help us with direction and things we need. And I want to have more like helpful things. So I talk about more interactive groups. There's a lot of things, especially I want to do things with kids. That's my goal, is to someday, it may start now, I don't know. Someday, if I'm not working so much, to get involved more with things to help kids, especially in the area of mental health, which is a really more and more studies coming out now showing that all of these problems are starting at very young ages, that we didn't realize how young it is. Like 50% of the mental health issues are traceable to age 14 now, 50%. So there's nothing in the schools or anywhere that really deals with things before it starts, like preventative measures. There's nothing. There's good stuff after, more and more, but nobody's looking at it like, well, what's it all about? The stuff we're talking about here, I'm hoping to try to translate into something that is more secular and more able to be used to help kids. So that's whole other project I'm kind of hoping Elisheva and I are working together with some other people to try to figure out. So we would like to have anybody's input on that. I started a group on that already. I got away from it a little bit because I got so many other things going on. I swear this dog is threatening to misbehave here if I, but then I go to let him outside and he doesn't want to go outside. So I think he's just confused. Hey, y'all can pray all you want for me and Elisheva. Yeah, we got a lot of crazy things going on. Her mother's not doing well. She may end up living with us out here. Hold on. Dog picks the worst times to be a brat. You stay right here. What are you eating? I think you got hold of the cat food. Yeah, you found the cat's food. Great. He's hungry. All right, if you're good, you'll get fed again. Yeah, the little one's upstairs sleeping, but the big dog, Pooby here, he's just got this look of feed me or something. So yeah, I posted the tentative. I'm feeling more confident about it now, especially now that I have more time. Like I said, tentative schedule of what we want to try to do. Sometimes it has to be flexible because, especially, probably more for Elisheva's part. Like she's trying to figure out when she can do that Derek Hashem like final room, and tentatively we're looking at next week, but that may get changed. It really depends because she's got a full-time job and she's in school, and she's here, home, and she does these studies, and she's like that's just crazy, it's a lot of stuff. So we may have to flip one or two things to try to get Derek Hashem in when it works best. But other than that, everything else I think is doable. just a question of me staying as focused as I can in the weeks ahead with this medical stuff and the insurance companies and all that other stuff that I'm sure is going to get lots of fun in the days ahead, because you know how that goes. So I'm hoping this room tonight was okay. Again, it's an assortment of information related to the two big things. That there's these 4 levels of existence, 4 levels within us of, physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. There's these 4 levels all over, and a hidden 5th one. And then you have the 10 Sephirot that kind of like, emanate in different ways in these 4 levels. And there's much, 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 much more. But this was kind of like just to give an idea of that. And the biggest thing is to keep it very broad and general at first. There's a tendency in our culture and religious background sometimes to try to want everything to be nice and black and white so we know exactly what it means. And you're not going to know exactly what it means with spiritual worlds because they're so infinite, So you try to grasp the larger overarching concepts first. Like one of the most important ones that we talked about earlier was, mercy versus judgment. Don't even think of that yet. Think of expansive versus constrictive, something that's force versus form, pouring the water, saying enough. If you think like those general things first, then when you see the different subsets or subgroups, you'll understand, oh yeah, that's relating to expansiveness versus contraction. I get it, and it'll make more sense if you don't get too particular or try to force things or, like a concept like, let me think of one. Okay, yeah. There's an angelic being called Metatron. So I get a lot like, so is Metatron Yeshua? Is Yeshua Metatron? It's like, stop trying to pigeonhole things, okay? Understand the concepts first and then make some kind of connections if you can. So that kind of stuff, So that's the biggest piece of wisdom studying Kabbalah. I kind of learned, started a long time ago, and there wasn't a lot of help. So it was kind of like made a lot of mistakes along the way. It's like, I'm like, oh, I get it. Oh boy, do I understand it. And then boom, I'm reading something going, oops, no, I had it all wrong, Well, I had it all wrong, kind of. And then I'd go back and forth. And it just takes time and, trying to, focus on some things, but not too specifically. Yeah. And that's the whole masculine feminine dynamic, that dualism that's in creation. It's the whole of the Bible rests on that whole idea of, giving and restriction, of chesed and gevurah, back and forth. Everything kind of spins around those two opposites. It's, either something's in the proactive giving mode or something's in the restrictive, measurement mode, and they call that masculine, feminine. They call it mercy and judgment. The whole Torah and all of creation, the whole story is based around those two things, right to left, and the idea of uniting the groom and the bride, up and down. So you have left, right, up, down. So that's why Jacob's such a central character, by the way, because he had his grandfather Abraham was on the right, all loving kindness, mercy, and his father Isaac was on the left, all restriction, judgment, and then he's considered in the middle of the two. It says Jacob was in both tenths, it says. So he's that balance left to right, but Jacob's the one with 2 wives, and he had Rachel below, the lower feminine, and he had Leah above, the upper feminine. Leah is Binah, and Rachel is Malkut, and Jacob is the 6 Sephirot, the Vav, in between Binah and Malkut. I don't know if you're following me, but that's why he has the left, right with the father, grandfather, and he has the up, down with the 2 wives. So he's Tiferet. He's the middle circle. Tiferet is Jacob you recall, because he's that perfect left, right, up, down integration. And you'll find so much stuff, messianic stuff. I have it on 13 Petals websites, all this messianic comments about Jacob. His image is in the throne of God. He was a co-creator with God. All things are sustained through him. It's like, wait a minute, is that the New Testament I'm talking about? Because isn't what they say about Yeshua through the New Testament? And it's like, yes, the same things that are said in the New Testament about Yeshua are said in all this various kabbalistic literature about Jacob. That's sent because he's central, because he represents that idea of that Mashiach idea that connects everything. So it's fascinating to see the language that's used in some of this literature about Jacob. You could just substitute a couple words in it's New Testament stuff. It's really weird. I'm sorry, I missed some things is there anything out there to help me meet Anthony's autism, ADHD? I'll have to ask Elisheva. She's a psych nurse and going for her master's. She knows all that stuff, helping kids with those are real, like diagnosed type of issues. In terms of like spiritual things to help like that, I can't answer that yet. I don't know. I'm thinking more what I was talking about earlier, of course, was more just getting kids to understand reality and human beings and how they fit and all that ahead of time. So they get it and they're comfortable with it and they have the roadmap and all this stuff before any problems develop. That way, especially with like technology and social media, it'll give them a way of understanding all that instead of just being thrown into it like they have in the last 20 years. Kids have just been thrown into technology and stuff that we know nothing about, and it's destroying them. It's crazy. It's absolutely destroying these kids today. And, because we didn't know, caught us off guard. Okay, right? Maybe we can, reset a few things and help some of them, or the next bunch. We'll do what we can, but trying to I've already got an outline of things that I'm trying to put together and develop, and then get some medical input, psychological input, and then get some professional people to, I'm pitching it to them, not to make money, but pitching the idea, saying, hey, what do you guys think of this? Because the first healthcare organization that gets ahead of this is going to be the one in all the newspapers and magazines and calling all the shots and yada yada. You got to appeal to them with what makes them tick, right? So if this is something good and we can put it together and we can convince professional healthcare community to grab onto this to help kids before these problems erupt, and it becomes they can look at it like a fad. I don't care. I know it's based on sound Torah principles. I mean, Stephen Covey wrote a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You substitute a couple words and you have a rabbinic text on the 7 lower Sephirot. That's the book is all about the 7 lower Sephirot, but he doesn't know anything about that. He just tapped into it somehow, just like the Matrix movie tapped into things, So you can present things to the public that are palatable because they're not religious, but they can be based on these sound principles. So let's go deep and get the most sound principles there are and train children along these ways so that they become well-balanced adults, young adults, or even preteens. At least they're well-balanced before they hit middle school, before they turn 14, when we've identified all the problems as emanating from that age. Let's just change the whole landscape. That's my goal with that, so that's the big long-term project. And I don't know, maybe me being out of work right now is the first step toward that. I don't know. I'm just going to try to maximize my time doing these things with you guys and with my wife and other people to try to, put some of these different projects together. They're all connected somehow. These chat rooms, the 13 Petals site, the prayer group, we have a Torah resource center. I'm trying to develop stuff for people that are kind of like coming out of the church or tired of like some of the Messianic Hebrew root stuff that wants something more kosher. And I'm just trying to put a whole bunch of resources that are out there together in one place in an organized fashion. That's another project that's already in place at a low level, but I want to develop more and more. So a lot of good stuff. Still a few people here. Any other comments, questions, ideas, or anything? I haven't heard anybody take the mic all night. Shy. I could open up my chat window. Closed. No, my chat window's open. There it is. I have been drinking a lot of water here while talking. Anything on tonight's room, the worlds of the Sephirot, or any of the other topics that anybody wants to talk about, or the things we're talking about doing, prayer or spiritual phenomena or something like that? If anyone has any pre-ideas regarding that or questions, it's a good time while we're all here to bring it up. Can you explain more about the different worlds? Well, yeah, I'm trying to think something, a particular angle or something. So this world we're in is like the furthest away from the perfection of God, if you will. Think of it like, first is God. And one of the ideas that you see in like Christian teachings is there was God, and God started making things and adding things. But Judaism looks at it almost the opposite, like taking away, like constriction, because there's only God. So we're starting with everything is God. We need to take away to make room for something else. So the first constriction, where it becomes something separate, if you will, from God, is that first highest world where it's just very conceptual, these ideas and the names of God and the Sephirot themselves, which are like the emanations and the channels for things to come through. All of that kind of is the first development, if you will, the first restriction. It's not God, only God. Then you get something a little bit more, or actually a lot more concrete, although it's not concrete. And that's the whole idea of the upper spiritual world, something actually that is within creation, that's identifiable and has characteristics like the throne room of God, the archangels, all that stuff. That's, I think, the next level in this direction. It's more identifiable and has pieces and parts and functions. So the more like differentiators you see, the further away from God, because God's a perfect singular unity. So the further away into pieces and parts you see, you're heading this direction, and the more rules you need. So then you get into angels who go back and forth, and they're running all the errands and yada yada, and that's a whole mixed realm, because that's where there's a lot of that's where God says not to fool around with divination and that stuff, because that's that lower spiritual realm, like the Egyptian magicians and the witches and all those things in the Torah. They're tapping into that lower spiritual realm. Like Hashem says, you don't fool around with that. That's not your world. That's just a temporary world, by the way. That's all going to go away one day. We won't need that angelic world anymore when everything is brought together. In fact, this literature says the Vav disappears. The Vav goes away, and the two Heys are connected. And that's the two temples, the lower temple, which is the physical temple, and the whole idea of the heavenly temple above are come together. So that third millennial temple is actually a combination of the two. It's that the one like overlaps the other, if you will. That's what the Ramchal teaches. It's fascinating. So the Vav will go away. Anyhow, so the angelic world is more concrete, more identifiable. The angels have specific names and tasks and things. But again, it's still way beyond what we are. So every world is very different in terms of, how, like I said, concrete or identifiable it is. By the time you get to our world and physicality, everything's hidden from God. We don't talk to God. We don't hear God's voice. We try to find ways to connect. We need lots of rules down here. That's why there's all these Torah commandments, because the further away you are, like if your child is gonna go do a sleepover, 3 blocks over, you tell them, well, don't forget this and that. But if your kid's going on a trip overseas, you're probably going to give them a lot more things to consider and think about and be wary of, and you know what I'm saying? So the further you are away from the source, the more rules are needed to make sure things don't fall apart. That's why there's so many laws and rules and things at this level. So the further away from God, the more constriction there is. And ironically, to get back to God, you have to use the idea of constriction too, because we're so surrounded by garbage and materialism and non-spiritual things that you have to restrict that stuff out of the picture, so to speak, and push that away so that you leave room, if you will, for truth and spirituality to connect to the next level up, to go back to God. So the process of spiritual growth is always preceded by tzimtzum, by constriction. You need to push stuff out in order for the good to come in and make the connection. So you move up a level. Now you know more about God. You know more about life. Great. You're still going to have problems, still going to have issues, and there's no rest in this world. It's a quote from Ushpizin. I don't know if you remember that. The rabbi says to Moshe, Balanya, man achieves all these things, and he thinks, great, I've done it. No. On to the next level. There's no rest in this world because it's all about getting closer and closer to God. Once you accept that, life gets a little bit easier, although the problems don't necessarily get easier, but some parts do, So anyhow, so you get to the next level, same thing. Okay, now I'm here. Now what, God? What do you want from me now? I thought I was doing good, and that's where I've been a lot lately, to be honest, is like, okay, I've done all this stuff and I don't know where things are heading. Now what? And then some crazy stuff starts happening in my life that you could say, whoa, that's not good. That's a bad thing. You get trouble at work. Your health is bad, this and that. And you could look at that negatively, but I kind of at least have enough experience to know, oh, something's up. Something's up. When that kind of garbage starts happening, I got to start thinking why. When I start thinking why, I start pushing the garbage away to get to God. And now God in his mysterious way enables some type of connection I didn't have before to get to the next level. So maybe it's the stuff I need to change or have changed, in me in order to proceed with some of these like lofty plans that Elisheva and I have. We're both talking about that. Both of us need to make some kind of change. We may not even see what it is right now, but we need to make some kind of change to get to that level of what we can sort of see as, a little bit more clear every day where I think we need to go, And then you have the little miraculous things that happen. Oh, geez, I'm out of work now. I have time. Somebody gave me a laptop and I lost my laptop they took it away from me. I have a laptop. I wouldn't have had this. I wouldn't be able to do this if the person hadn't done that a few weeks ago. And it's like, why did he do that? Why did that happen then? I thought that was pretty cool at the time. Now I see, oh, that was a major provision ahead of time. So, things start to come together sometimes. Sometimes they take a long time. If they take a long time, it means God's waiting for something from you, So could go all night preaching like this. I'm not a preacher, but the idea, So we try to get back to God. We're, in a sense, there's different ways to express it. You're going up the levels of the soul. You're going up the levels of the worlds, closer and closer to God. As you just, again, don't be too specific about it. But the idea is always the same, that you're navigating those Sephirot, especially those 7 lower ones. And we really got into that with Ushpizin, what all that means. We'll talk about that more this spring too, with the Omer count. And you're navigating these 7 things and improving, you're changing things about your soul, yourself. It's tikkun midot, repair of the characteristics, it's called tikkun midot. So you're performing tikkun midot on yourself and others, but mainly on yourself to take yourself to the next level. And you're doing this, one level after another. It's always going through those 7, if you will, and, learning more and putting new things together and going further and further like that. Well, I am almost midnight here, so last call for comments and questions. I can post some more. There's tons of information on the worlds of existence on the internet from kosher websites like Chabad has a lot of stuff, and there's others. So I can post some links, but if you stick to those good Jewish websites and just type in some keywords, you can find good information. Eish HaTorah has a whole Kabbalah section. It's like a course. It's very easy to understand, very basic stuff. And again, nothing crazy, nothing. People hear Kabbalah and go running away because they hear all these crazy things. It's like, okay. That's like hearing, I don't know, pick a famous cult leader, Jim Jones or David Koresh. Oh, I heard he teaches things about Messiah, so I'm going to run away from the whole idea of Messiah because I equate that with David Koresh or something. It's like, okay. So you want to equate, people run away from the Bible because they equate it with something bad. I don't know. People make all kinds of connections because they don't bother to really investigate, And yeah, people do bad things in the name of God, in the name of the Bible, in the name of Jesus, in the name of it. People do bad things in the name of spiritual concepts, people, and ideas all the time. If you're going to judge those things by the people, you got worse problems, What is that line in the let God be true and every man a liar? Yeah, there you go. people, misquoting and misusing the Bible. I mean, that's right in the New Testament. It was one of the biggest issues with Yeshua and the Pharisees was his criticisms of how they were not only hypocrites in places, but misusing the Bible, the Word of God, and actually, actually pushing people away from it because they were turning it into something it's not meant to do, and they were missing the whole higher point of connecting to God. It's in Matthew 23:23. It's great you did these things, he says, but you're missing the higher intent of the Torah, which is this process we're talking about here, connecting more and more to God, internal change. So because they were missing that, he really had a lot of negative things to say about that. So that's all it is. It's understanding how, if you could look at the diagrams of creation, how God functions, like diagrams, if you could look at, the idea of pieces connecting and how everything functions, almost like the inner workings of a clock or a watch. You got gears and dials and levers. It's kind of like that. It's just understanding how things work and what they mean. Then you read stories in the Bible, and you start to realize these are more than just stories. They represent things. Paul wrote the things in the Bible, or the people and the stories are there for our example. That's a deep comment if you understand what he really means. So this is all understood in Judaism, that these things, these people and everything in the events represent concepts and ideas for us to learn from, all the way back to Adam and Eve. I mean, Adam's a singular being, right? And then Eve is formed out of his side, this formation. The word is Yetzirah. She's formed. So the masculine and feminine that were like the singular thing are separated. There's your first act of left and right dualism right there in Genesis. So it establishes the tone and the pace for the rest of the Bible and history, that you're going to have this left-right dynamic that really are one. That's the thing. They're really one at the beginning, and we got to go back to that. Our goal is to go back to that unifying thing. That's the whole purpose here. And that would have happened in the garden. Would have happened in the garden if they hadn't messed up. It would have been a whole different story if they had messed up. But that's a whole other level of discussion, and Elisheva gets into some of that stuff. And it's like, she'll be the first to tell you it was designed to mess up. It's like, oh my gosh, here we go. So she takes things to a whole different level. But yeah, we'll do more of these rooms randomly. I don't know if we'll do another one next week, even if she's not ready to do Direct Hashem. I think we need something totally different next week. I'm not sure what. I gotta start pondering that tomorrow, see how she's doing, because I don't know if she's going to be ready to finish Direct Hashem. Kind of like a summary thing, Cliff Notes version for people to come in, and kind of more of a fun discussion room, and because that's been a very serious, long haul since last June. And it was a good experiment, but it's hard to do a long week by week thing like that with people unless it's a very small group that's into it. And that was good. I mean, it was a lot of learning experience for her too, because she's going through the book. She hadn't gone through it in like a good 15 years. She did a room back on Pal Talk way back over 10, 12 years ago on Direct Hashem, and hadn't touched it since. So she went through and she's learned a lot, and she knows all this other stuff now. Just blowing me away sometimes. Our conversations at the table at Shabbat, I sit there sometimes and I'm just like stunned, because she just has ways of pulling things together that I've never seen anybody do. So, and I try to capture it, I try to write it down or put something online, and I'm like, why did I do that? Because someone's going to ask me a question and I have no idea how to answer it. I did it the other day. I don't know if anybody saw it. I actually deleted it because she gave me a hard time. Rightfully so. What did she say? It was crazy. All right. The marriage supper of the Lamb. You familiar with that idea? It's that's how it's expressed in the New Testament. The whole idea that there's a marriage supper one day when the bride and groom are one, right? Jewish concept. The marriage supper of the Lamb, I'm trying to remember, is the integration of evil back into the system done in a holy way. That's a mouthful. The marriage supper of the Lamb is the integration of evil back into the system but done in a holy way. That seems to make no sense. But then when you hear her explain it, it's like your head falls off. Because at the marriage supper of the Lamb, there's a banquet, and the banquet is feasting on a concept called Leviathan. We're actually feasting on this thing called the Leviathan. And there's all teachings around what that means. So it's like ingesting, this is all spiritual concepts. So we're ingesting Leviathan back in, but which has connections to the other side, the evil world and all that. We're ingesting it like back into the system to make everything that singular oneness that it once was, because everything is one. God created everything. Even he says in Isaiah, I created good, I created evil, right? And it's like, okay, this gets really deep, so she comes up with stuff like this, and I'm like, okay. Gonna go back in my corner now. Still some people here. I don't know if everybody just fell asleep on the computer, but so I'm trying to think if there's anything else about the four worlds. I mean, it's like I said, it's a lot of things. The whole idea of the seven heavens is fascinating. There's like even some teachings show that there's 7 levels at every world, like physical and so on. And the angelic world has angels assigned to all of those, Sephirot, type classifications of angels, because you got like seraphim and ophanim and cherubim, and there's other ones. There's a whole series of classifications of angels determined on how they function, like what kind of role they play. And they all align with the Sephirot within the world of Yetzirah, within the world of angels. So you have that structure of 7 or 10, both, either or, at every level. And it's just interesting to see that if you understand the concepts, you can understand, okay, why is that angel over, why is the angel Gabriel like at Yesod? Why is the angel Michael at Tiferet? There's an angel at Gevurah, who's the evil angel, if you will. Go by the initial Samek Mem, and he's like considered like the guardian angel of Esau, and he's directly related to like Hasatan and the dragon and the serpent and the evil realm. All of that stuff comes from that Gevurah, from that side. So there's this, get the concepts first, and then the details make sense. What like bucket things connect to. Maybe there's like 10 buckets and there's 4 locations. That's not a lot to have to study, It keeps you on track. Okay, it goes in this bucket and it goes at that level, It gets it's very organized way to study things, to understand things. Yeah, well, I want to do a lot of like really unique, different types of rooms, not just talking at people 99% of the time. I really look forward to the room, and we're going to send out some information ahead of time for those type of interactive rooms on dreams and on spiritual phenomena. I'm not sure we're going to get those in exactly because March is pretty full with the Matrix movies and Purim and Passover, and we're already almost in March. I think the first Matrix movie would be in 2 weeks. So next week's still open, but I don't want to rush those other rooms either. So we're probably looking beginning of April, I think, when we're looking to, I can't remember what I wrote on my calendar, but I will post that calendar more formally somewhere in a few places. So I'm thinking it's going to be April, and we'll do them back-to-back weeks because there's a connection between dreams and spiritual phenomena. There's obviously can be and are connections between the two in the Torah and in people's lives. So that would be really fun to have people take the mic and tell their stories. It's like an AA meeting. You go up to the mic and say, "Hi, my name's Joe, and 3 years ago, up in the closet, and a ghost was there." Something, I don't know. We're going to talk about all kinds of crazy stuff on those nights. Dreams is fascinating too, and we're not going to like start playing around with like dream interpretation. No, that's guesswork and a lot of low level stuff. And one person's blah, blah in a dream is not necessarily have anything to do with someone else's thing in a dream. We're not going to get into that kind of stuff. That's just like not kosher stuff, but we're going to get into a higher level kosher stuff and discussions that I hope will be helpful to people. Kabbalistic Pesach. Yeah, I have a Kabbalistic um, Haggadah. Um, there is one. Okay, we'll pull that out. We'll definitely pull that up like the week before Passover, which is probably I don't know. Whatever's going on, we'll make room for that. Yeah, we'll have a Kabbalistic Passover discussion. The elements on the Seder plate actually line up with the Sephirot. Yes, they do. The fact that Passover is in the middle of the month of Nisan or Aviv, whatever you call it, is very significant because there's time cycles from the day, the week, the month, and the year. There's time cycles that go like closer to God and further away from God, if you will. Kind of like Keter and Malkut thing, only time-wise. So the most obvious one is Shabbat, right? Shabbat is the crown of the week, but then you like move away from Shabbat to like the furthest point away, and then you start coming back, if you think of that. And that furthest point away is Tuesday night. And there's writings in the Zohar that say that you should avoid should not avoid traveling at night on Tuesday nights because it's the furthest thing away from Shabbat. Stuff like that. It's weird. The new moon and the full moon. The full moon is good. The new moon is dangerous. That's why there's all those prayers and special things done on the new moon. On the yearly cycle, which is the significant one here, the month of Tishrei, which has Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot, is called God's favorite month, whereas the opposite month, Passover is in, Nisan, is called the month of demons, Shedim. Why? Because it's furthest away from Tishrei. It's on the opposite end. So Passover is smack in the middle of the month of Shedim, the month of demons, because it's taking on that realm, the other side, at its fullest strength to, again, getting ahead of myself here, it's taking on the darkness at the height of the darkness, right in the middle of there. And that's why there's teachings that talk about the Passover being at that time as a direct connection to this struggle here. And then you have the idea that crazy stuff in the Zohar, that the lamb is selected on the 10th of the month. The Passover is on the 14th, but the lamb is selected on the 10th. Hold on. And that corresponds to the 10th in Tishri, Yom Kippur. They make a direct connection to the goat sent off in Yom Kippur to the lamb being selected for Passover. The Zohar does this. There's mysterious connections. So that's like all kinds of like crazy, fascinating stuff behind the scenes that in Judaism teaches about these things, which really sheds light on, oh God, everything else. You start hearing this stuff, all of a sudden you reread your Bible and you start, the light bulbs start just popping like rapidly, So yeah, we'll definitely throw some kabbalistic Passover things in as we slide right into the Omer count. Maybe we'll do that. See, I'll have to look. So the best time to do that would be the week before Passover. I like doing things the week before so that when you meet with your family or friends or whatever you do for the holiday, any holiday, you have this information like ahead of time. So like Purim, we'll talk about Purim things the week before Purim. We'll talk about Passover things the week before Passover. Or at least several days. And that'll be cool because then when you're sitting through your Seder and you're with your friends, you're talking, you'll be like, hey, did you ever think of this? Did you hear this? And you start a whole conversation and everybody gets all excited and goes home and does some research and we all learn and grow. That's the way to do it. Just keep provoking each other with, crazy ideas and keep moving forward. You don't move forward by sitting around saying and doing the same thing month after month, year after year. There's no growth opportunity there at all, right? You got to, the oracle in the matrix says she's there to unbalance the equation. So you have your nice, comfortable little equation, forget it. You need to unbalance it. You need to move. Hebrews, the end of Hebrews chapter 5, says, I thought you guys would have moved on by now. We're not going to repeat the same old stuff. And then he lists stuff that sounds pretty complicated, and he calls it the same old stuff. And he goes, we need to move on from here. Stagnation is not an acceptable choice lifestyle. You must keep moving forward. Otherwise, the pull of this materialistic world will just keep pulling you away from God. You got to keep the car in drive. You can't put it in neutral because the hill is tilted the wrong way. You know what I'm saying? So I'm getting all midrashic here. I'm petting my dog too, keeping him busy because I don't know what he wants. I think he looks tired. He wants to go to bed. So yeah, we'll do that. So I'm going to work on the calendar some more tomorrow and make some announcements and post this stuff and start, recruiting crazy people for some of these projects. And just need everybody to try to get involved the best they can. And everybody's got lives and busy, but try to make room for Torah. It's really important to try to look at each week and try to put something. It doesn't have to be with me. It just put something with Torah as you like on your to-do list at the top, and then everything else follows. A few is 168 hours in the week. So if you can give what's 1% of 168 would be 1.68, right? 1.68 hours of Torah stuff in a week. How can I manage that? Well, it's 1% of the hours, right? So, all right, I'm going to shut the room. Thank you all for being here. It has been 4 hours. I came on at 8 o'clock. Well, that's good. Just keep pushing it. Good resources. I mean, go to Chabad, go to aish.com, go to Torah.org, go to Azamra. That's a Breslauer site. If you stick with the traditional stuff, it's not perfect, but it's the only stuff that connects back to Mount Sinai and Moses, and it's all the same path. Yeah, nothing's perfect. People like to criticize that and say, well, but what's your alternative? Stuff people are like making up in these groups today that has no connection back. They just read the Bible and say, hey, this is what I think. This is what it sounds like to me. So I'm going to write like a book about this, and people swallow it up because they don't know any better. And it sounds good, and it meets their preconceived ideas already, which are still very not kosher, you know what I'm saying? And, because they grew up with them. So it sounds kind of like what I believed before, but it sounds more Jewish, so it must be good, that kind of thing. And it's like, oh my gosh. So stick to the traditional Jewish websites like that, and you won't go wrong. You won't, because that's the same stuff that's in the New Testament. It's just, if you believe it or not. If you don't, fine. It's the same stuff that's in the Torah. It's in the Talmud. It's all one. It's all saying the same thing. This idea that those things are in opposition is crazy. I mean, the very same characteristics that Yeshua attacked in the Pharisees in the New Testament are the same characteristics that you look in the Talmud, and some Pharisees are accusing others. It's under section in Sotah that's called the 7 types of Pharisees. It's the 7 types that are described in the New Testament. It's like the same thing. They're criticized for the same kind of hypocritical and other type of behaviors. The Pharisees accusing themselves, other Pharisees, in the Talmud. It's like the same exact stuff. So people have this idea that all of a sudden this problem showed up in the first century. It had been going on for a century or two before, and it continued after. That New Testament's this tiny little 3-year slice of Jewish history. And it's kind of like somebody, listening into their neighbor's house, and there's a fight in there, and they're picking up on a few words, and they form opinions, and they have no idea what that family's been dealing with for generations, and so on. It's like, how do you think you can understand by getting a couple of chapters in a book out of 3 years of history? And oh, by the way, only a little bit of dialogue. It's nothing, so it's all good. If it doesn't seem good, the problem is probably not with the text. The problem is, like my wife said, the first time she got the Talmud, she's a great reader. She went through that Talmud and put it down and said, this is the craziest stuff I've ever read. She'll tell you 90% of it, she said, was nuts. And then she put it down and did a lot more studies and went back to it years later. Oh, come here. And hold on a second. And then she went through it years later, and it like she'd never seen it. It was completely different thoughts about it, So, the more we learn, the more we can understand other things. So we just keep building and building and building, precept upon precept. So, all right, love, everybody. Shalom. At the end of the day, love is the last thing, because love is the first thing. So hope to see you all online soon. I'll be putting out a ton of material, Lord willing, over the weeks ahead, because I have time. So I have a lot of things that have been on the board waiting, and God in his peculiar ways has made time. Now, if you can peculiarly influence insurance company to pay for my salary while I'm out or part of it, that would be nice. Whatever. Here we go, right? Flying by the seat, what's that called? Flying by the seat of the pants here. I have no choice here. This is like almost forced upon me, which is kind of funny. But it's an odd answer to prayer, so I'm happy. I have lived with a lot less in my life. I've lived out of a car. I've lived in worse circumstances. And my daughter's 18 and she's got her own car and her own money, and she's quite independent young lady. So I don't have to worry about a little baby anymore either. So it's all good. The health will be okay. I just want everything. I don't want any issues to do with my employer or the insurance companies, that end of it, because that's the weird end. When you're out on a leave, they can give you a hard time over whatever they choose to give you a hard time over, because they're not happy and no one's happy. Doctors on my side, and the facts are on my side, but they always, the big thing's the insurance company. They don't like to come through with disability. Is what it comes down to, is the disability, short-term disability payment, and meeting the criteria for that, and that kind of stuff. They love to say no. They love to fight that, and Lord willing, that won't happen. I'm praying that just miraculously that they just say, okay, we'll accept what the doctor says, and here you go. We'll cover you for whatever period of time you're out, whatever, at whatever percent that is. At least it's some money coming in, So I would love that to happen, and I don't have to worry about that. Once I get that green light, once they say, okay, it's a big burden to be candid. I want to just trust God, of course, and not worry about anything. But as a human being and the quote unquote man of the house, and we both are working, so that's good. But I don't want any additional pressure on my family either by no money coming in. So that's the big thing, is that the other stuff will take care of itself over time, just, getting better physically and all that. So mostly that, just pray that all the crazy stuff doesn't get too crazy. And it goes smoothly. Everybody does the paperwork, everybody signs off, and life is good. Because that once, again, I should just trust God and not worry about any of this, and I am going to try to do that. But, we're all human, and it doesn't hurt to not have the extra stressor. There's enough of them. So that's what you can pray for. Pray for my health. Pray for that. Pray for my wife. She's got a lot on her plate. It's a full-time job, mental health place. It's not always easy. It's never easy. Does these Torah studies, taking college classes to get her next move up, because we do need more money going ahead, because I'm getting near, I'm getting older. She's younger. So she's going to be the big breadwinner as I cut back on things. So she's got a lot on her plate. She's got a lot of talent and all, but she's, so it's a lot of stress sometimes. And having a teenage daughter doesn't, sometimes that's a real picnic too, So especially now she's 18 and we never see her. So all right. Well, thank you all. Yeah, and my daughter is going off to Israel and on a trip. She's first time out of the country. She's going with a group, one of those Birthright Israel groups. They send you over there for free. Just bring your spending money, or as she likes to call it, her beer money, just to antagonize me. She likes to remind me that the drinking age in Israel is 18. Thank you. Typical daughter, right? She's going in May over to Israel with a group. So that's going to be kind of crazy. Our little baby gone off with strangers to another country. I'm looking at pictures on the wall, and she's like 2 years old in the pictures. And I'm wondering, oh my God, what is going on? All right, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it when people come and, hang out. Look for a lot of announcements in the next days ahead, because want to try to put some good things in place now that I know I have time. That's a given. I will have time. So now that I know I have time, I want to definitely start pushing some. Because I don't like trying to start something and then no time and it falls apart, and you do a different thing and you don't get anywhere. It falls. Now that I know I have time, I can start launching some things, and hopefully get more people involved in what they're comfortable being involved with. There's, like I said, there's a variety of things that we're attempting. Some people may be more like these kind of groups. Some may want to do research. Some may want to do part of the prayer group. Some may want to do, who knows? There's all kinds of things we can do, and we all learn and grow from it. So it benefits us, but we're also looking to just benefit other people too. Just keep increasing the awareness of Torah and all these different parts of our lives, not just learning Kabbalah, but actually learning, tomorrow morning when I get up and I got to go to work, or I have a child has these problems, that I have things that I can turn to in a more profound, deeper way that actually help me in my day-to-day living, because that's what we need to do. We need to help each other with day-to-day living, because if that ain't going right, then it's hard to focus on studies and stuff, right? So I want to really have more, like, we got, this stuff's great, and learning the fundamentals and the background and the Kabbalah, this is good, because now you get how it all really works. Now you can look at the precise, particular, physical, emotional, intellectual, day-to-day things that we need to deal with, and you have you know how the whole system works. So now that you know how the whole system works, you can devise your plan. Your personal game plan is not being done in a void or on some whimsical secular knowledge. Your personal game plan is now formulated around the image of God. Okay, I mean, look at it that way. It's profound, It's like, yeah, this is how Hashem set things up to work. I'm going to set my life up to work along the same way. That's not a bad idea, So I'm preaching again. See, I should have been a charismatic cult leader. My wife says I should have been a cult leader. I would have been a great cult leader. This is the kind of barbs we exchange around the table here. Okay, time to go. Talk to you all soon. We are ending the meeting. Good night and thank you. Shalom.